The Glass House, Special Edition, Glass Series, Volume 1. Written by Niels Williams. Narrated by Jeff Clark. Prologue. August 29th, 1999. She was only half asleep when she suddenly smelled the potent smoke in the room. She thought to herself, was this just another dream? This was no dream. In fact, it was very much real. The ringing wasn't just in her head either. This was the smoke alarm going off in her home. "Oh my God! Jeremy, wake up! Wake up!" She shook her husband, who lay beside her unconscious to it all. This is the one reason that she begged him to go to a sleep clinic. He could sleep through an earthquake and the sound of a trumpet. "Jeremy, get up! I think something is on fire!" Dazed and barely awake himself, he slowly rose and sat up. It took him a second to realize he wasn't dreaming either. He instantly jumped out of bed and stumbled over to the front door. The doorknob was extra warm to touch. He braced himself for the worst possibility. A fire. Like a Band-Aid on a wound, he swiftly pulled the door open. Just as they feared, Jeremy and Lynn could see the amber glare against the newly painted wall over upstairs balcony. He had to deal with something caught on fire before, but those were small. Like the barbecue pit last July that was up a little too high, or the time his daughter let the grease in the skillet burn down. This time, no one was cooking. His two sons were asleep down the hall, so where did the fire come from? "Baby, the kids!" He could hear his wife shouting behind him. The smoke was getting to his lungs. "We gotta get them and get out of here!" Jeremy grabbed Lynn's hand and led her out of the bedroom. As they walked towards the kids' room down the hall, Lynn peered over the balcony, watching the living room couch and coffee table in flames. Through the flames, she could see a window had been shattered. This was arson. Someone wanted this house burned down. Someone wanted this family gone. But who? There wasn't any time to answer that now. They had to get out as quickly as possible. Just as Jeremy attempted to open the door, there was a crescendo of shattered glass that came through the other side of the door. "T, BJ, get on the floor!" he yelled through the door. The doorknob was too hot. He couldn't hear what his sons were doing. In fact, he couldn't hear if they did anything at all. All he could hear was the crackling of the flames that were on the other side of the door. Jeremy prepared himself for the reality of what he would face on the other side. He took a few steps back. "Lord, please protect my boys," he prayed aloud. Just then he gave all his strength and rushed towards the door. Using his body weight, he managed to break the door open. Jeremy looked in horror to find the bunk beds in flames. They screamed at the sight. Lynn rushed in behind him. "No!" she screamed as she ran to the beds. "Lynn, no!" Jeremy grabbed her arm to hold her back. "My babies!" She belted out a mix of screams and sobs. Jeremy continued to hold her back as he sobbed along with her. Lynn kept fighting her husband off to get to the bed, and finally, releasing herself from his grip, she ran over to find some indication, some hope that maybe they weren't in the bed. "Lynn, get back!" Jeremy yelled after. There was too much smoke and flames for her to see. The house was under attack. There wasn't time to let it sink in that they have just lost their two children. They knew they had to do the hardest part, let go and go out. Jeremy pulled his wife away to get to the door. Flames were now spreading in the bedroom and downstairs. Making their way towards the stairs, they continued to cough excessively. Too much smoke has already been inhaled. They crawled the rest of the way. Jeremy had to make it back to the top of the stairs when he noticed Lynn was no longer next to him. She was still lying at the doorway of their son's bedroom. He rushed to her aid to find she wasn't conscious. "No, baby! No, baby! Come on, stay with me!" He pulled her arm, hoping she would wake, and continued crawling. She still was not moving. He sat up on the smoke-stained carpet to check her pulse. Nothing. "Lynn, come on now. We gotta get out of here," he whispered to her. Sobbing and coughing himself, he turned her over on her back to perform CPR. "Please, come on, baby. We gotta make it. We gotta get out of here." She coughed as she came to. "Oh, thank God. Baby, come on, let's go." Jeremy, relieved, moved her in front of him. He couldn't believe this was happening to his family. He thought about the back patio as a final escape. They may have a chance getting out that way. Once they got into the steps, they stood to their feet and raced to the bottom of the stairway. Lynn noticed the weather-beaten wooden steps were creaking more than usual. Running through the kitchen towards the back, they saw the door wide open. Did someone come in before setting the place on fire? Lynn stood outside on the patio as she watched her husband stand in the kitchen in deep thought. Jeremy was still thinking of his sons. He couldn't believe they didn't make it. He refused to believe it. Maybe there's still some hope. "Baby, come on, what are you doing?" She ran over to him and grabbed his arm. He didn't move. He grabbed her arm back and pulled her into a hug. Lynn was confused. Why isn't he coming outside? "I gotta get our kids," Jeremy whispered, and he embraced his wife. Lynn jerked back, looking at him in confusion. She stared at his tear-filled eyes. "Baby, no, they're—" Interrupting her, he embraced her once more and gave her a kiss. The kiss was a reminiscent of the one they shared on their wedding day. No, they're gone!" Shaking and sobbing, Lynn held on tight as she could to him. She knew if he went back in, he would not make it out. The flames had spread through the kitchen. Lynn looked behind him at the counter where their oldest daughter once took her first steps. "I'm getting our boys." He released himself from her grip and turned. Jeremy, come back, please!" She screamed after him. She watched as he dodged the flames rising around him. He made his way back to the steps. He was halfway up when the stairway collapsed beneath him. Lynn watched him disappear through the steps. Screaming after him, she ran in herself. There wasn't a way around the flames anymore. The smoke clouded her vision as she tried moving further in. "Jeremy!" Coughing and sobbing, she desperately moved closer to try to make it to the steps. Her eyes were burning. She could now barely see. Now that she was back in, there was no way back out. She dropped down to the floor and crouched to the nearest corner of the wall. Realizing there was no way back out, she curled up in a ball and buried her head in her knees. "Jeremy," she sobbed. After watching the flames make its way towards the stove, she closed her eyes in defeat. A white Buick pulled up to the burning house. Cops and firefighters were already at the scene. "Oh, no. The driver of the car watched the horrific scene. A young girl sitting in the passenger seat watched in stunned silence. She closed her eyes repeatedly, hoping she would see something different each time she opened them. This was a hard sight to witness. She closed her eyes one last time, took a deep breath, and opened her car door. Rushing across the street, she prayed aloud to herself, "Please, don't let them be home, Lord. Please." Suddenly, a stretched-out arm stopped her in her tracks. "Whoa, young lady, you can't go past this line." The arm belonged to a tall fireman. He peered down at her as he motioned her to move back. What happened?" she choked. "Arson. We believe someone in this family had an enemy and took it out on the whole darn family." The woman covered her mouth as she gasped. "We were able to get the parents out before the fire got to them, but they didn't make it. Too much smoke inhalation," the fireman explained. "What? Oh, my God!" The woman covered her face and shook her head in disbelief. She then looked up as if she just had an idea. "What about the kids?" she asked. "Oh, they're just fine. They're the ones that called us." The fireman pointed over at the police car behind the woman. 2 boys sat on top of the car with jackets wrapped around them. A family friend and neighbor were sitting next to them, hugging them. "Yeah, they said they were trying to make a snack in the kitchen when someone threw fireballs in the house. So they called us and then ran out into the backyard." The woman began sobbing and covered her face again. Remorseful, the fireman realized he must be speaking with someone close to the family. "I'm so sorry for your loss, ma'am. How did you know the Weiss family?" The woman looked up and wiped away the running mascara from her cheeks. She looked toward the house as paramedics wheeled away the bodies. "They were my parents." Chapter 1. 15 years later. Let me get this right. So you're saying that you have to be out of town for a whole month? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had always supported my wife Alexis and her career in fashion design. When we were in high school, all she could talk about was how she could alter her friends' outfits and make them look better. I would always be there to be her critic and her cheerleader when she felt she wasn't going to make it. I just knew she would be successful. It was just in her to design and be creative. Everyone in school kept saying she should be a model instead of being the designer because of her light brown eyes complemented the shape of her eyes. And her figure was always camera ready. But I knew her true potential and I wanted to help her get there. By college, she was already getting calls for up-and-coming modeling agencies and they wanted her designs on every model in Brookside Village, Texas. I admired her ambition and she inspired me to step up my game in my career as an architect. She often would have to go out of town to California for fashion shows for a few days to a week, but that was usually few and far between. This time it's New York, and according to her, this is the big break she's been waiting for. I took another look at the puppy-faced clock on the wall, keeping time before I have to leave for work. 30 minutes. I understand that we haven't been away from each other for this long since we got married, but this is a big opportunity for me, sweetheart. Alexis was trying on her new boots she had bought yesterday. It seemed like she was more into them than she was into the conversation. Finally deciding on wearing the flats with her leopard tights and black tank top, she settled herself on the bed beside me. I just know it's going to be difficult for me to be without you for so long, I exclaimed, extending my hand over to hers. I couldn't help but notice that cute look she gives when she wants to give in, chin tucked in and the usual playful pouting. It never failed. With a defeated sigh, I finally asked, "What time is your flight Saturday?" "She's actually leaving for a month?" Walter looked at me in disbelief as he took another sip of his Heineken. The Houston Texans was winning 12-8 against the New England Patriots as Walter and I sat at the bar the next evening watching the game. This game was going to determine if the Houston Texans were headed for the Super Bowl. I shifted around in my seat to the worn wooden bar stools. It was amazing that we could even still hear each other over the constant threats yelled to the TV above our heads. So far, the most common have been, "Come on, what is this coach doing out there? He needs his ass kicked. And that referee can use a kick in his head calling that foul." Friday nights were always game night at Hank's Sports Bar on Jefferson Street. It was convenient being that it was only 5 minutes away from work. Walter brushed back his dark hair from over his face. Usually when he does that, it's because there's an attractive woman nearby and he knows they get a kick out of watching him do it. He already had the striking resemblance of that famous actor, Brad Pitt. And if that wasn't enough, he was the star quarterback in college football up until he injured his knee that prevented him from playing again. Back then in college, I had no problem with him attracting a lot of women. I was satisfied with my own looks and gotten by pretty well. Before I finally responded, Walter yelled out, "Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, baby." He was already on his second beer and I hadn't even opened mine. I couldn't say no to her. After all, this has been her dream since high school, and things are finally starting to pay off for her. I noticed the drunken guy sitting 2 seats away from Walter tilting back and forth. It was only a matter of time before he finally fell out of his stool. Walter let out a loud belch before speaking again. "Well, I'm proud of Alexis. It's about time she finally got to put herself out there and become an established designer. Remind me to thank her again for designing Kara's wedding dress. It would really save my sister the money." I nodded in agreement as I watched the drunken man behind Walter stumble out of his seat. The man's tie was loose enough to fall off his neck, and it did. He turned toward Walter and I, then squinted as if he was trying to read something on my face. I began to grow uncomfortable. I didn't know whether to laugh or start making way towards the door. It was one of those drunken stares where their eyes don't blink for a minute. Shifting myself in the seat again, I regained my focus on the conversation with Walter. "Kara told me someone bought the place on Crane Road," I said. "Yep, this guy named Thomas Glass just bought that house. I spoke with him briefly during my night patrol on that street." I looked at Walter in shock. No one else gave that place a second thought after the original home burned down 15 years ago. It was all over the news that year. Many people in our neighborhood turned in to watch the story of the Weiss family and how the 2 kids left their parents in their home. The kids made it out in time, but the house itself was destroyed by the time the firefighters arrived. According to the reports, it was believed to be arson. The parents weren't smokers and didn't have anything electrical in the room that could have started the fire. They found the man that had a long-time grudge with the family guilty of committing the crime, and the surviving children were sent to live with their grandparents. It was just too disturbing for anyone to want to buy the house, even if it had been rebuilt. Who would want that memory in their home? "Doesn't he know what happened in that house?" I asked, nursing my beer. Walter took another sip of his and responded, "Well, I asked him when he was moving his stuff in, and he said he knows the whole story and said it doesn't bother him since it's a brand new home." Walter suddenly gave a worried look as he continued his next sentence. "Well, that guy seems a little strange to me." I studied Walter's face as if he was going to continue speaking telepathically. Walter had turned his attention to the TV. "I was interested to know more about the guy who was brave enough to get that place." "Strange how?" I finally asked after 3 minutes of him glued to the TV. He finally snapped out of the daze and looked at me again. "Like when he talks, it's very monotone. Everything he says is almost with no emotion. And he kept answering my questions with other questions. I felt like I was talking to the Riddler from Batman." I laughed at the thought of how that conversation might have gone and how Walter was probably so caught off guard by his responses. "Was his questions multiple choice or required a summary?" I joked. By the look on his face, I could tell he wasn't amused. "Yeah, you laugh, but he comes off a lot stranger than it sounds," he explained. I suddenly noticed Walter's hands shaking as he sat deep in thought. He was probably reflecting back to his meeting with Mr. Glass. I was tuned in completely now. I leaned over the table as if in a secret huddle. "What else is it?" I dared to ask. Walter took his final sip of his beer. "He paid the house off in cash." I was surprised to learn the man was wealthy enough to pay it all off, but that doesn't make him strange. "Okay, so he's rich. There's nothing wrong with that," I interrupted. "Todd, the bag he carried it in had a lot of dry blood on it." Chapter 2. The backrest of the seat was pressed against my spine as I leaned back. I gave Walter a confused look. Why would there be blood on a bag full of money? I tried to let my mind go to possible innocent reasons. Maybe it was blood from the food that may have dripped on it when he was cooking. It's not blood at all, it's just paint. Maybe Walter just wanted it to be blood to have something to talk about. "Are you sure that's what it was? It doesn't make any sense." I remained slumped back in my seat in disbelief. I can tell Walter was getting annoyed that I didn't believe him. It smelled horrible, like something decayed." My mind wondered again. Maybe he's a hunter. "I wouldn't think too much of it," I advised. I grabbed my beige jean jacket from my chair as I stood up to leave. "Besides, whatever is wrong with the guy, you don't have to worry about it anyway. You've already closed the deal and your business with him is done." Walter moved his hair from his face again. "Yeah, you're right. I still have 3 more clients to meet with this week." Walter ordered another beer as I began to make way for the door. "By then you'll probably forget about him anyway," I yelled across the bar as I left. Fall had always been one of my favorite seasons of the year. As I headed closer to home, I thought about last year when Alexis and I had taken a picnic at Chesapeake Lake. Like me, she enjoyed the outdoors. We fished like we always did every year when no one else was out. We usually would catch at the most 3 catfish. "Todd, when will we get to cook the fish? I'm getting hungry." She laid her head on my shoulder. She was already wearing my jacket, but I could tell she was still a little chilly. "Just as soon as I catch one, you've been getting all of them so far." Alexis put her fishing pole down and walked over to sit near the fire we made together. I knew if I didn't go sit with her, I wouldn't hear the end of it. I finally gave up on catching a fish. After all, we already had enough to cook, even if I wasn't the one that caught them. She had that warm smile on her face as I set the skillet on a frying rack. "I really appreciate you spending this time out with me, sweetheart." Alexis wrapped her arms around my waist. This was one of the few nights we had gotten to spend together last year. Between my meetings and her constant calls for gigs, we couldn't spend as much time together as we wanted. I enjoyed those times. I noticed the burgundy heels beside our bed as I turned out the lights in our bedroom. Alexis should be in New York on her way to the hotel by now. 11 p.m. I had begun to get worried. I checked my new Android phone I bought last week. No calls or text. Why haven't she called me by now? Her plane should have landed at 9:45 p.m. Sitting on the corner of our king-size bed, I scrolled through my recent calls and selected her name. My mind wandered while I waited for her to answer. I entertained the thoughts running through my mind like, I wonder if I could remember my contacts' numbers in my phone without looking for their names. Ring, ring. What will I make for dinner tonight? Ring, ring. Maybe I'll pick up pizza. Ring. What if something happened on the plane? Ring. Hey, babe, my plane had a delay. I would have called if my phone hadn't died. I think I left my charger at home. It was such a relief to hear her voice and know she's safe. Well, as long as you're okay. Are you at the hotel? I could hear the television on in the background. Reruns of Good Times was playing from what I could hear. Yeah, Todd, I wish you were out here with me. The city is so beautiful at night, and this is such an awesome suite. I imagined Alexis hailing a cab in Mary Tyler Moore fashion. I pictured her suite having plenty of space and a great view of the city. Her bathroom probably has a jacuzzi. That's great. I would have loved to be there with you. My attention suddenly went to the outlet across the room. Her cell phone charger wasn't there where she usually keeps it. But how did she charge her phone? Sweetheart, I don't see the charger plugged in. Where is it? I asked, scanning the room for other possible places it could be. There was no response on her end. I could hear rustling of bags and zippers, followed by the theme of Good Times playing. It's not plugged in? She finally asked. I was so sure that's where I left it. I'll just have to check when I get home. I'm glad I borrowed my friend Beth's phone charger. Since she has a whole bunch of them, she let me have this one, Alexis squeaked. How was your day? She asked as I settled in bed. I began scanning the bed for the remote to the television in our room. Good. I let out a small burp. I could still taste the beer I had at the bar. I then thought of the conversation I had with Walter. I spoke with Walter tonight. He closed the sale on another house. I heard more ruffling on her end. She must have been going through her bag again. Beside his career as a cop, Walter made a great side profit in real estate. But that's great. Where at? She asked. She seemed a lot more excited than I expected. But then again, she does get excited about good news from anyone, even if it has nothing to do with her. You wouldn't believe it. Remember that house on Crane Road? I answered. Alexis let out a gasp. Really? Wow, I didn't think anyone would ever buy that house, she exclaimed. I finally found the remote next to the nightstand and turned on the television. Well, it's been 15 years. People should have gotten over what happened a long time ago, she added. There was suddenly a silence. Alexis, are you still there? I asked. Oh, sorry, I accidentally pressed mute on the phone, she finally said. A loud knock came in on her end. Oh, hold on, sweetheart, someone is at the door, she exclaimed. Well, who could be knocking at her door this late? Oh my gosh, I heard Alexis shout across the room. What are you doing here? Who? And what are they doing here? I always trusted Alexis. It wasn't that I wasn't insecure and worried of another man. It is late and she has never been out to New York. Who else would know she was there other than Beth? I heard Alexis' phone being picked up. Hey, baby, Kara's here. Walter's sister was at the door. But what was she doing there? And why didn't Walter tell me she was out there too? Tell her I said hi, I said as I continued to flip through the channels. I will. We've got a lot of catching up to. I'm going to call you later. Love you. Chapter 3. The parking lot today was packed. Everyone was needed at work for the meeting of the building plans for Lacer Hotel on 8th Street. I managed to snag a spot as someone was just leaving. I can't think of a day where I didn't enjoy coming here. I loved what I did, and I was good at it. As I set up my desk in my office, I noticed the neon green walls surrounding me. Every time I walked into this office, the same thought always crossed my mind. I hate the color in here. Todd, running a little late today? My coworker Daryl appeared as I raised my head from my blueprints. Hey, Daryl, traffic's been crazy today, I explained as I added my final touches of my floor plans for the proposal this week. I see. Well, we missed you in the meeting this morning. You think you can deliver? Daryl was always so competitive, even though we're working for the same company. To him, I was his biggest competition when it came to who can bring the best plan for the next building. Ever since our boss mentioned how well I've been doing for the company and how I have a chance to advance in the business. Darryl waved his rolled-up blueprint with a smug look on his face. I think I'll manage, I added with a chuckle. I found it amusing that he thought of us as competition. You know, you might as well just hand over the proposal to me and not even waste your time. I got an offer they can't refuse. He inched his way towards the door. At this point, I would gladly help him out of my office. He was beginning to go from amusing to annoying. Just then our boss, Stephen, walked into the office. Darryl, this isn't a competition and this isn't The Godfather. He laughed as he made his way towards my desk. Both of you have been very heavy hitters in this company, and I look forward to seeing what you two have to bring to this meeting. I rose from my seat as I fastened my button on my brown blazer. I certainly look forward to it, but I'm not sure I can live up to your work, Darryl added. Oh, Darryl. Stephen started as he placed his hand on Darryl's shoulder. Don't kiss ass. Stephen continued. I was now the one with the smug look on my face. Now, Todd, since you were not here for the meeting, you didn't get to hear about who will be at the floor plan proposal in 2 weeks. Stephen focused his attention on me. Darryl inched his way further out the room, but not before offering a taunting gesture towards me. Eric Donaldson will be there. He is Forbes' top architect of the year, and he's looking forward to seeing what we have to bring to the table, Stephen said as he had rubbed the part of his head where once laid a toupee. It was about time he finally stopped wearing that. As hard as he tried, he wasn't fooling anyone. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. This is a big one for Todd, and I trust you will be there and ready. His voice trailed as he made his way out the door. I sat back in my chair and looked at my blueprint. Looking forward to it, I said to myself. The pressure was on now. Usually I feel pretty confident with my work. Now, knowing that there will be another shark in the tank, I knew I may have to do some tweaking on this plan. This was going to be big, and I had to be sure that it was worth making the cut. Besides redrawing out my plans, the majority of my day consisted of making calls to clients. Each one had their own twist they wanted to add to the plans I had laid out for them. As much as I enjoyed my job, it bothered me when they make last-minute suggestions. I stepped outside for a quick smoke break. It wasn't as warm out as it was this afternoon. The fabric of my jacket was not doing a very good job at keeping me warm. Desperately searching for my lighter, the wind was growing more aggressive. I pursed my lip tighter to hold the cigarette in my mouth. If I didn't know any better, I would think you're having a stroke. A raspy voice echoed behind me. Startled, I turned my attention to a burgundy cane complementing a royal blue trench coat. My gaze moved up to a grin that seemed slightly crooked. Trust me, it's not a good experience, he added as he motioned towards me. I was growing uncomfortable and guarded the closer he got. It wasn't until I backed away that I noticed the one hand he had free was inside his coat. I don't know this man. Why did he decide to strike a conversation with me? Is it a weapon in his pocket? My first instinct was telling me to hit him before he tried to attack me. Have you had one before? I asked, keeping my eyes on his coat. Yeah, a few years ago. I guess you can tell on my face, huh? Here, let me get that for you. He finally removed his hand and revealed a lighter. My suspicion dwindled down. I needed the smoke. I obliged his offer. Thanks, I said. I took a few puffs of my cigarette as I checked my watch. You know those things can kill you, he added as he put the lighter back in his coat. Don't you smoke? You're carrying a lighter. His green eyes gave me a stern look. That uncomfortable feeling in my stomach returned. If a man wears boots, does it make him a cowboy? He asked. Well, Mr. I realized I hadn't asked his name, nor did he offer to tell me. Thomas Glass, he offered with the tip of his black fedora. This was him. The same guy Walter told me about, the strange man. He came off a little odd, but it's not enough to get me shaking in boots. He doesn't seem so strange. Well, Mr. Glass, I got to get back to work. Nice talking with you, and thanks for the light. Checking my watch for the last time, I made my way towards the door. Likewise, Todd. Well, until next time. I looked back at him, but he was already making his way around the corner. As I made it back to my office, I settled in to view my progress on my revised floor plans. With a few more additions, I was feeling better with the outcome. I took a step back to get one more glance of the plan from a distance, like a painter creating his masterpiece. This was my canvas. If all goes well, this may very well be my masterpiece. I smiled triumphantly. The coffee that was brewing before my break was still hot. I walked over to the table and helped myself to a cup. The view of the city from my window was clear. We were surrounded by buildings just as tall, if not taller, as ours. Just 3 miles down was a building I developed. As I peered out to the quiet streets where I had stood for my break, I thought about Mr. Glass. Walter had always been calm around anyone, no matter how intimidating they may seem. What was it about him that got Walter shaken up? This, among other questions on Mr. Glass, was swimming through my mind. Where was he coming from tonight? Where was he going? Who keeps a lighter on them when they don't smoke? Does he have family in this town? And suddenly a question I should have asked myself and even him crossed my mind. How did he know my name? Chapter 4. They loved it, Alexis exclaimed over the phone. It had only been 2 days and I was already missing her. It's not like we haven't been apart for days before. We are still newly married and still in that can't keep away from each other phase. As much as she traveled, it was still difficult for us. The first fashion show was tonight. I couldn't wait to hear all about her first night premiering designs. Monica, the modeling agent, said she'd love the designs I had for the models. If the rest of the shows go well, she says she will continue to promote my designs. Her enthusiasm was oozing through the phone. I was happy for her. I sat in my driveway as my car keys dangled on the flashlight keychain in the ignition. I was supposed to be meeting Walter and the rest of the guys at the pool hall 30 minutes ago. That's great. Baby, you are making it. I'm so proud of you, I encouraged. My cigarette pack sat on the dashboard. I wanted to take one so bad, but I knew Alexis will give me that speech that she wants me to quit. Maybe I will. Eventually. Kara, Beth, and I are heading out to the Hard Rock Cafe to celebrate, she explained. There was now a cigarette in my mouth, and I was fishing for my lighter that I spotted on the floor earlier today. How are the plans coming? I know your meeting is in 2 weeks. Alexis was now barely audible. She must have me on speakerphone. I continued to reach for the lighter. It's going great, I answered, just barely touching the lighter now. Got it. I finally picked it up and lit. Todd, is that a lighter I just heard? Are you smoking? She asked, scolding. Of course, this is the moment she takes me off speaker. No, not at all, sweetheart, I lied. Come on, Todd. We talked about this. You said you will try to quit. She whined. I checked the clock on the radio. 40 minutes late. I am. Just a little setback is all, I said. Finally starting the car, I took my last smoke and tossed the cigarette out of the window. As I drove out to Andy's pool hall, I began thinking about Mr. Glass. It bothered me that this man knew my name, yet I had no recollection of who he was. The question, who is he, had burned into my mind since our encounter yesterday. Maybe my reputation has preceded me. After all, I did design some of the buildings in this city. I arrived at Hank's sports bar where Walter and the rest of the guys were already in the middle of the pool game. As I walked towards the game room, Walter, Anthony, and AJ turned their attention towards me. AJ towered over all of us combined. At our heights, if you were out looking to meet women, it was not recommended to stand next to him. What's up, man? We've been waiting for you like an hour. Where were you? AJ asked. You know, I had to check on Alexis before I left to make sure she was all right. I picked up a pool stick from the racks off the wall as I took my jacket off. Anthony must have lost to AJ. I saw him handing cash to Anthony. So, you ready to get schooled tonight, homeboy? Anthony gloated as he counted the 20s in his hand. Anthony always had a way of talking to us as if he was our grandpa, yet he's only 2 years younger than we are. He had an old soul. His interest was anything on vinyl and learning any historical fact. Man, you just got your ass handed to you. You sure you want to get cocky? I retorted. Damn, Aunt, you just gonna take that? Walter instigated. I could tell he wasn't on his first drink. Walter was slurring his words and was rocking back and forth in his seat like he always does when he's a little tipsy. Anthony gave Walter an annoyed look as he broke the set on the pool table. "Hey, Walter, I saw your boy today. You know, the glass guy," I said, scanning the pool table for a possible opening. 6-ball, side pocket. I took the shot, missed. "Oh yeah, Thomas? How'd you meet him?" Walter asked. Anthony was catching up with me in the game. He rose from the pool table and looked at me smug. "He just popped up outside the office building on my break. I don't know where he came from." 4 balls were left on the table. "Well, how'd that go?" he asked after taking his final sip of beer. "Strange," I answered. 8-ball, corner pocket," Anthony announced. Missed. Walter slowly rose from his seat. "Really, was he acting the way I said?" he asked. I watched Anthony motion to make his attempt on the shot. "Sorta. He carries a lighter and doesn't even smoke," I replied. AJ looked at me, confused, as he puffed on his own cigarette. "What? Who does that?" he asked. Exactly what I thought. I gestured my pool stick towards AJ as I spoke. "Maybe he was looking to set something on fire," Anthony joked. He won. I suddenly felt a chill run through my body. "He probably was. He seems crazy enough." Walter chalked down his pool stick as AJ set up again. Everything always seems to be black and white with Walter. If anyone seemed strange to him, they had to be crazy or possibly a danger and a threat. I like to give people benefits of a doubt before passing any judgment. I don't think the man is crazy, but it is odd that he carries it. He also knew my name, I volunteered. Walter had a puzzled expression on his face. "How did he know your name?" he asked, scanning the table for a shot. "I don't know. I was going to ask you if he knew us before you worked with him." I adjusted myself on the stool against the wall. Above my head was a plastic bass along with other fishing memorabilia. "No, not at all. But come on, Todd, you're doing pretty well for yourself with your business. He probably recognized you from your work," Walter added as he adjusted his sweater vest. "Who is this guy you're all talking about?" Anthony asked, attempting his last shot. "I closed the sale on that house I've been trying to sell. This guy, Thomas Glass, had bought it all in cash." Walter told it as if he was telling the greatest tale ever told. Anthony dabbed his cigarette in the ashtray on the table. Both Anthony and AJ had dumbfounded expressions on their face. "He paid the house off in cash?" AJ asked. He shifted his weight as he supported himself on the pool stick. "Man, what is he doing? And how can I get in?" he chuckled. "He's retired. He had a successful business in advertising from what he told me," Walter offered. "And now he has that place on Crane Road. Don't you find that odd?" he asked. AJ looked at Walter and me in disbelief. "The place that got burned down? Why would he want that place?" AJ inquired before taking a sip of his beer. "Well, my thoughts exactly," Walter chimed in. "I know I couldn't do it," I added. As I gazed across the bar, I noticed there were 2 women looking our direction. One of them was saying something that may have been a joke about one of us. They were far enough to whatever they were saying was barely audible. As they giggled in unison, they stood up and walked towards us. "Uh-oh, looks like we got ourselves some additional players, y'all." Anthony adjusted the collar on his shirt as he scanned the women standing in front of him. "We were just wondering who was winning," one of the women started. She stared at Anthony with a smirk on her face as she caressed the strap on her purse. Her blonde hair was pinned back. The other woman was sitting on the bar stool next to AJ. "I'm Janet. And you are?" Janet extended her hand to AJ. "I'm Alex, but my friends call me AJ." He kissed her hand. I knew Anthony and AJ had a way with women, but usually they're the one that pursues, not the other way around. This was irregular. Walter and I exchanged glances of confusion and amusement. "I'm Quinn," the blonde woman giggled as she shook Anthony's hand. "So I guess the game's over, right?" Walter exclaimed as he hung up his pool stick. I shook my head and laughed. "Nice to meet the both of you. Did you want to play a game with us?" I asked. Walter inched towards me as we watched Quinn and Janet flirt with AJ and Anthony. "I think they have a different game in mind," Walter whispered to me. "Yeah, this is just too random. They might want to check for Adam's apples," I joked. AJ and Anthony grabbed their coats from the coat rack. "We're going to catch you guys later," Anthony said as they made their way to the door. Where are you going? I asked. They know a spot where there's a party and we're going to hang with them, AJ volunteered. They made their way out the door. Walter grabbed his coat as well. I got to get back home anyway. I have a lot of paperwork to finish for my client tomorrow, he added. I removed my jacket from the rack and headed out with Walter. So, how's that proposal coming along you've been working on? He asked. As we walked through the parking lot, I scanned the lot from my car. The night air was calm tonight. I stood for a moment to soak in the moon, gazing down at us. I enjoyed calm nights like this. I would always come outside just to enjoy the air, even while smoking. It's going well. I think I might have my best work yet, I speculated. Honestly, I wasn't worried about my plan. This was a proposal that will mean a difference between millions made and maintaining the same salary. I'm usually sure of myself, but it was a lot riding on this one. Walter fiddled his car keys through his fingers as he shifted his weight. You can always say that about every floor plan, he laughed. He then stopped laughing and had a more serious expression. But somehow, one way or another, you actually do make each project better than the last. How? He added. I then laughed and chimed in with me. Walter, if I told you, I'd have to kill you, I joked as I pat Walter on the back. All right, well, if I know Todd well, I know you're going to knock this one out of the park, he yelled. He was now at his car down the lot. Good night, Todd. He finally drove off in his BMW. I stood at my car door and gazed up at the crescent moon. The chill I felt in the bar ran through my body once again. For some reason, I felt uneasy. I was beginning to feel that there was something waiting for me in the week to come. Maybe it was just the pressure of the proposal getting to me. I started the car as I gazed up once more. Good night. Wow, it looks like they're really taking care of you out there. Alexis's smile was shining through my laptop screen as we communicated on the video chat, Skype. I could see her spacey suite behind her. The half of the room I could see had wall-to-wall windows and an oval-shaped king-size bed. I know, right? I love this place, Todd. It's so great out here. Baby, maybe we should come here together sometime, she exclaimed. I watched as Alexis removed her makeup. She had just come back home from a fashion show after party. So, did you get to meet anyone famous at the party? I had my laptop with me in the kitchen on the counter. It was convenient for me to be able to communicate through the computer while making my midnight snack. There were a few recognizable faces there, but no A-listers, she admitted as she slipped on her silk pajamas. I picked up the computer and made my way towards the bedroom. The cherry oak wood stairs creaked with each step I made. Once I got to the bedroom, I sat the laptop down on the nightstand. Suddenly the picture was scrambled and blurry. I could barely make out what was going on the screen. I can't see you anymore, sweetheart, I informed. I know, it's the Wi-Fi here. I can't pick up a signal, she explained. The now pixelated picture was of her moving around. I couldn't make out what she was doing. Her rapid moving was making the picture more blurry. I couldn't help but wonder what she was doing and why she seemed to be moving so quickly. I'm checking for a better spot now, she volunteered as if she knew what I was thinking. I leaned in closer to the edge of the bed to get a better view. At this point, I was close enough to fall off. As I scanned the screen for some better resolution, I saw Alexis moving closer. Hold on, she said. I was in no rush, but it would be nice to see her clearly before I went to bed. I adjusted myself more comfortably. I could only make out a few details in the screen. I could see her walking around back and forth from the bathroom. I could see the glare from the television playing. I could see someone else. Chapter 5. I picked up my laptop to get a better look. There was a blur of a taller person in a green top. Who is in the room with her? This clearly didn't look good, but I've seen situations like this play out before in TV shows. Someone is caught in a compromising position with another person. The man or woman that catches their significant other flips out in a rage and accuses only what they think is happening. Of course, it never turns out to be what it seems, and the accuser looks foolish. I didn't want to be foolish. But I don't want to be a fool either. I have to trust her, and I still have to know. The green blur was standing in front of the blur of Alexis. Whatever words were being exchanged, I could barely hear. The guy in the green blur was handing Alexis something in exchange for something else. Maybe this was just delivery takeout. Why am I getting so concerned? I know my wife. She wouldn't do anything to hurt me. I know she doesn't have a cheating heart. This time away from her is really beginning to get to me. I shook my head in disappointment in myself for even allowing my mind to go there. The green blur disappeared behind the front door. I saw Alexis set whatever she had down on the nightstand. She then moved closer towards the laptop. She must have lifted it because now her face was closer to the screen. "What you got there, babe?" I asked, trying to sound as if I didn't care who it was that came in. "Chinese delivery," she gleamed. The picture was finally coming into focus. Alexis was propped up on her bed. Her left cheek was swollen with food. "Sounds good," I smiled in relief. "It is so good, baby," she gloated with her mouth full. "Well, I hope you tipped the guy," I joked. She suddenly had gotten quiet. "Who?" she finally said, swallowing her second bite of food. She looked at me in a puzzled stare. Now I was as confused as she was looking. "The guy that just delivered the food," I retorted. She still looked puzzled, and finally, as if coming out of amnesia, she replied, "Oh, him! Yes, I tipped him. For a moment there, I didn't realize what you were asking me." She chuckled. I still was looking puzzled. Her delayed reaction was not sitting well with me. I kept reminding myself, "Don't be foolish." The meeting was full of high-end architects and 3 hotel owners. The hotel owners were looking for a new location and were scoping out the best proposals. I sat among the architects in my company. Daryl was sitting across from me with a grimace on his face. I sat back in my chair as I listened to the first proposal, ignoring any annoying and offensive gesture he may be sending my way. I scanned faces of the hotel owners' reactions of the proposal presented. I imagined them as the judges of the TV show American Idol. There were 2 men and 1 woman. Each of them watched in blank expression. I don't know why I was getting so nervous. This is what I had been preparing for. Big companies like these to take on my projects. I rubbed my sweaty palm against my pants. Suddenly, another hand clamped onto my left shoulder. It was Stephen, with a smile across his face. "How are my 2 best winners doing?" he asked as he squatted down between us. "Oh, I'm great, sir. Ready to knock this out of the park. I can't speak for this ball of scary over here," Daryl chuckled. Stephen looked at me in a concerned and pleading look. His eyes were begging me to deny that I was feeling the pressure. "Great, sir," I answered with a forced smile. Honestly, I was beginning to get unsure of myself. I started rethinking my proposal and if I could have tweaked anything. "Great, 'cause you're up." His smile restored on his face as he stood up. He walked over to the front room and fastened the top button of his blazer. "Thank you, Carl," he started as everyone clapped. "Now, this next person has been in our company for quite a long time, and he has been doing wonders." I prepared myself for how I would start. I kept rehearsing my opening to myself as I continued to rub my hands on my pants. I didn't even notice Daryl leaned over in my face. Startled, I jumped back away from him. "I need you to throw this proposal," he stated. I was confused, but at the same time it was typical Daryl to just think he can ask something like that. "What? No, why would I do that?" His expression was suddenly looking hopeful and serious. Was he serious? "Look, Todd, we all know your work is one of the best here. I've got a lot riding against me right now. I'm going through a divorce and I have 4 kids to look after. This could be the break I need." The look on Daryl's face was the most serious I have ever seen. This completely caught me off guard. I searched Daryl's face for any clue that he wasn't genuine. "I can't do that, Dee. I'm sorry, but I didn't know you were going through all that." As I listened to Daryl, I was also listening for my name as Stephen was still speaking. So far, all I could hear was reminiscing. "Now, Todd, first day with us, he had me a little nervous with that museum plan," Stephen joked. A roar of laughter filled the room. "We all have our personal problems, man, but I'm not going to throw this just because you have yours," I snapped. I couldn't understand why he would spring this on me at the last minute. I finally could hear Stephen closing his introduction. "And without further ado, everyone, Todd Clemons." I rose from my seat and fastened the button on my blazer. I began heading towards the front when Darrow grabbed my arm. I looked down at him and saw a pleading look in his eyes. "Good luck, Darrow," I said, removing myself from his grasp. Standing in front of the room, I scanned the many faces. Some were smirks, others were stern expressions. The hotel owners gazed at me blankly as they leaned in. "Thank you, Stephen, for that very extensive introduction," I chuckled. It was calming to hear the rest of the room laugh as well. I set up my plan on the easel provided. "I present to you the next form of hotel experience," I began. "People want to have their own personalized experience. There are rooms that can be catered to each customer's idea of a getaway." Across the room, Stephen looked happier than the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. The hotel owners were looking pleased. By the end of my speech, I was feeling more confident. I shook the business owner's hand as I walked back to my seat. Ashley, the owner of the Lacer Hotel, rose from her seat and approached the front. "Well, I want to thank you all for coming," she began. "For my new location, I will be having Todd Clemons working with us." I looked up in a shock and awe. My plans had actually gotten picked. Darrow was still sitting, staring at me. I was growing uncomfortable with his stares. "What's up, D?" I finally asked. He nodded his head in disappointment. "Just couldn't help a brother out." He rose from his seat and walked away. I rose once again to approach Ashley. "Congratulations," she whispered, shaking my hand. This was unbelievable. My hard work had paid off. I imagined how Alexis would react once I tell her. That night, there was a celebration dinner on behalf of my accomplished proposal at the Washington View Hall. I had invited my friends, AJ, Anthony, and Walter, to the event. I didn't expect them to show until the last minute. They seemed to always get caught at their jobs. I stood looking at the bar trying to get in contact with AJ and Anthony. It had been 20 minutes since I called them last, and I still had not gotten an answer. They should all be off work by now. Maybe they're working overtime. The first 30 minutes of the event has been spent greeting other well-accomplished architects and business owners. After my final attempt to call the guys, I ordered another Cuba Libre. Behind the bar was a great window view of the city. I could see the hue of the sunset shower over the buildings and homes in the horizon. "Conrad's Tea!" I heard a familiar voice shout a few feet away. I spun around on my chair and saw Walter approach me wearing his Saturday night hat that he always wears when he's going out to special events. I don't know why he feels the need to wear it. His only explanation was that it brings out his facial structure and attracts women. I expected to see AJ and Anthony right behind him. I didn't see either one of them. "Where's Anthony and AJ? I've been trying to get in contact with them all night." I stood up with a glass in my hand. Walter paused with a concerned look on his face. He looked just as puzzled as I was. "I have no idea. I've been trying to get in contact with them myself. Now that I think about it, I haven't heard from them since the other night at the bar." Walter made his way closer to the bar table. "Gin and tonic," he ordered as he tapped on the table. "Yeah, it was the last I saw them, too. They were there with those women." I smiled and shook my head as I remembered their smug looks when they left with them. "Those women must have kept them busy. You know how it is. Once a friend finds a woman to spend time with, you can forget about seeing them for a while," he chuckled. I nodded my head and raised my glass in agreement. "Speaking of women, how's your lady? She's still out in New York dressing models?" he asked as he began his first sips of his drinks. "Yeah, she's really enjoying herself out there. Hey, how come you didn't tell me your sister was out there?" I picked up a mini chicken cordon bleu that waiters were serving around on platters. I immediately regretted getting it after the first bite. "Oh, yeah, her and my new brother-in-law David had took a trip out there for the weekend. They wanted to catch that One Love radio concert," Walter explained. I propped myself back up on my seat next to Walter. "There's been a pretty good turnout. There are a lot of people here." Walter scanned the room of the business owners and colleagues. As the mixed smell of cologne and perfume filled the room, I began to feel a headache come along. I didn't know if it was the smell in the room, my third glass of rum and coke, or both. "I'm going to step out for some fresh air real quick." As I rose from my seat, I fished out a $15 bill and tossed it on the table. "You feeling all right, T?" Walter placed his glass down and spun around in his seat to face me. "Yeah, I think the fumes in here are getting to me." I answered. There was a balcony out on the other side of the room. I made my way through the crowd, shaking hands and greeting other architects along the way. When I finally got outside, I removed my last cigarette from my pack. As I peered over the city, I could only think of Alexis and wish she was here to celebrate with me. I took my iPhone from the inside pocket of my blazer to check any messages. There was only the message I sent her earlier about what happened. She still hasn't replied. I decided to try and call her. It only rang twice before it went to voicemail. Where is everybody? I thought out loud as I placed the phone back in my pocket. I leaned against the metal banister and rubbed my forehead. A slow clapping suddenly echoed behind me. I rose up from the banister as I heard it grow louder and closer. I turned to find it was Daryl stumbling towards me. Hey, Todd. He started slurring his words. He was obviously drunk. Daryl? I asked, looking at him. It wasn't a question of, is it you, but more of a question of, are you okay? His eyes looked glossy over his small framed eyeglasses. His necktie was loose around his neck and his blazer was barely on his shoulders. You, he started. As he walked closer, I inched back to keep my distance. You are on top of your game, man. You got your great marriage with your big buildings. He gestured his arms open, spilling his drink. Daryl, you're drunk. I tried talking to him calmly to keep him calm. I never seen him like this. And me, my wife divorced me. My kids won't look at me the same. And the one break, he walked closer, speaking louder. The one break in my life and you snatch it away from me. This was supposed to be my celebration. People within earshot of us suddenly stopped what they were doing and crowded near the balcony. With the headache coming on stronger, this was the last thing I needed to deal with tonight. I decided to motion closer to him to calm him down. You're making a fool of yourself. Why don't you go home and get some rest, man? I assured. He stepped back from me and looked me up and down. Don't patronize me, he snapped. It wasn't until he bumped into Ashley, the CEO of Lacer Hotel, that he noticed everyone watching. What are you all looking at? I don't need your pity. I don't need it, I don't. His yells turned into sobs. One of the colleagues approached him to try to reassure him. I stood blindsided. It was shocking and sad to see Daryl like this. I knew he was competitive with his work, but I didn't realize it was affecting his life this much. He began heading back in, but not before stopping for a final word. Go ahead, Todd. Just keep on climbing. It'll just be all the more sweeter watching you fall. Chapter 6. What the hell? Walter chucked as he walked past the scattering crowd and onto the balcony. He must have either finished his drink or just sat it down back at the bar. I don't know, he just has some personal problems. I massaged my head as I leaned back over the banister. Yeah, I can see that. Why was he taking it out on you, though? He asked. Walter leaned on the banister next to me. The harsh wind was blowing my jacket collar up. I continued to look over the city in silence. I suddenly was feeling guilty. But why? Because I've worked hard enough for my accomplishments? I shouldn't feel bad, but I did. You know how some things just feel too good to be true? I finally let out. Walter nodded his head in agreement. There was a penny sitting beside me on the banister. It looked old and rusty, as if it had been sitting there forever. I picked it up and began to play with it. I watched the penny as it slowly flipped through each finger. What if this is all just too good? I asked. Walter adjusted himself from leaning to standing. Todd, what are you talking about? You're one of the hardest working people I know. If anyone deserves to get this chance, it's you, my friend. He twirled his fedora in his hands as he spoke. Hey, some of us have the skill and work ethic to get there, and some of us don't. You can't feel bad because of your accomplishments. That's just that guy's own misfortune. As he placed his hat back on his head, he started heading back into the building. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for another drink after that fiasco. The penny felt itchy between my fingers. I finally stopped moving it and placed it in my pocket. After putting out the last cigarette I had, I walked back in after Walter. I was just ready to get back home. I'm so proud of you, baby. I knew you were going to get it. I had Alexis on speakerphone while I was getting dressed for work. I couldn't understand why she hadn't picked up the phone to call me back last night. I was already running late after sleeping in. I had to rush more than usual. Oh, so you did get my texts. Because I was under the impression that you just didn't read them or get my calls. I yelled to the phone from across the room as I put on my necktie. Now, don't do that. I told you what I was going to be doing and that it may be an all-night event. You know that. Her cheerful tone changed quickly. The one night that I get this great news and I couldn't share it with her. Of course I was upset. I couldn't even at least speak to her on the phone about it. I'm sorry, sweetheart. It's just bad enough we couldn't celebrate it in person. It would have been nice to talk to you about it at least last night. As I made myself a to-go canteen of coffee, I had noticed the rolled-up floor plans that I haven't packed up yet laying across the couch in the living room. I understand, baby. Believe it or not, it has been difficult for me to be being away from you this long. How about this? I'll be home in another week, and we can celebrate any way you want, she cooed seductively. I smiled at the thought of what she had in mind. I definitely can't argue with that. Maybe we can make our celebration an all-night event, I flirted back. I heard her laugh from across the room. I would love to see that, she joked. The phone beeped. Someone was calling on another line. I ran to the counter on the other side of the kitchen to see who it was. It was Walter. Why is he calling? He should be at work himself. Walter is calling me on the other end. I'm going to call you later, baby. Love you. And once I heard her hang up, I clicked over. What's up, man? I thought you were working today, I answered. I gathered my briefcase and floor plans and began heading out the door. I heard him clearing his throat on the other end. Yeah, I took an early break, he answered. His voice still sounded as if he had something stuck in it. I wondered if he was coming down with something. Everything okay? You sound kind of sick, I asked. My cell phone was supported between my cheek and shoulder as I struggled to get the car door open. Yeah, I'm all right. Have you heard anything from AJ or Anthony yet? I've been trying to contact them and still haven't been able to talk to them. I finally got the back door open and placed my floor plans on the back seat. No, I haven't. Really? You still haven't talked to them? It was beginning to feel really strange that we didn't hear from these guys. Although they had jobs themselves, they still made time to bug us about where we're all going or hang out next, or if one of us could loan one of them some money. I sat in the car with the key in the ignition. I was ready to leave, but I didn't want to drive and be on the phone at the same time. You think they may be in any trouble? I asked. Walter cleared his throat a few more times before answering. I don't know, but something just doesn't seem right. Try and see if you can get a hold of them today. If not, I was thinking we could go try and visit them and see if they're okay. I was growing more concerned about them. This is really odd not to hear from them this long. Only thing I could think of was the women that left with them that night at the bar. Could they really be that occupied that they can't call us? Yeah, I'll give them a call later on today. I got to get to the site. We're getting started with the plans today, I stated as I finally started the car. Oh yeah, that's right. I heard you guys were going to start immediately. Well, good luck out there, man. As I hung up the phone, I thought about AJ and Anthony. I wondered if I really should be worried. After all, they did both find women to hang out with. Maybe they just are too preoccupied with them now to talk to us as often. As I sat in silence, I opened my contact list in my phone to find Anthony's name. I was suddenly interrupted by a loud knock on my door. Damn it! Startled, I dropped my cell phone underneath my seat. My neighbor from across the street, Brian, appeared outside the passenger door. He stopped waving when I finally rolled down the window. Hey, how's it going? He asked. The glare on his thick-framed eyeglasses blocked the view of his eyes. It was always hard to tell what direction his eyes were looking through his eyeglasses. Good, just running late for work. What's up? I said abruptly. I was really running late now, and I had no time to spare. Well, I don't want to hold you too long, but just working on my car there. Brian pointed towards the Camaro in his driveway. I lost my wrench. I think my dog may have buried it somewhere. Do you possibly have one I can borrow? He stood with a hopeful look on his face. Sorry, I don't think so. I started as I felt around for my phone. As I rose back up, I looked in my rearview mirror at his car. He's been working on that car for months. I haven't seen it out the garage since the first day he brought it in. Maybe he was into fixing up cars. I can check back with you when I get home. I began putting the gear in reverse. Disappointed, Brian started turning around. Catch you later, I said. Just then he turned back around and leaned over into the window. "Hey," he started. He paused to rotate his left shoulder. "Damn, this shoulder's killing me. Never jump out of a 2-story window. You will pay for it the rest of your life," he chuckled. At this point, I couldn't hold my frustration in anymore. "Brian, I really gotta go," I snapped. He looked unfazed by my short temper. "Listen, I won't hold you long, but I'm starting a bowling team and I'm looking for some good gamers. You want in?" I really wasn't in a position to answer the question right away. I paused and gave a thoughtful look. "I'll have to think on that one," I sighed. "Okay, just let me know." He tapped on the top of the car as he finally backed away. After completely backing out the driveway, I sped off down the street. I looked in my rearview mirror and noticed he was still standing in my driveway, staring my direction. Why was he still standing there? Things like that were what made the other guys and me uneasy to be around him. He always tried to find some reason to be part of our group. He just came off awkward. He tried inviting us to an out-of-town barbecue last month while we were already at my barbecue party. His responses always came off robotic whenever we turned him down. I remembered when AJ joked about the way Brian always rotates his left shoulder. We all said if anyone in the neighborhood ever comes up missing, he probably did it. "I want to thank you all for taking on this project," Stephen exclaimed. I stood next to Stephen as he gave his speech to the construction workers in front of us at the site. They each looked as enthused as we did. They knew this project would mean a bigger payout for them as well. My burgundy button-down shirt was sticking to me as the sun beamed down. "I will now turn this over to our genius, Todd here." I stepped forward toward the wooden stand where my design and floor plans laid. "As we put this baby in your hands, we trust that you will bring this design to life and make it what it will be for visitors and our community. Not just a vacation spot, but a great escape, a safe haven, and an Osage. Now we want to make sure we're using the best material for the base structure of this building." I pointed to key points of the plan as I spoke. "Will we need to have enough space around the folly?" one of the workers, Bill, asked. As I looked up to answer him, there was a familiar, well-suited man sitting against my car. From where I was standing, I recognized the cane that supported the man. It was Thomas Glass. He waved to me in salute as I stared blankly. What was he doing here? I turned my attention back to my project. "Bill, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Let's focus on the foundation first," I answered. "All right, guys, let's start building a paradise," I exclaimed. As the team clapped, I began walking towards Thomas. This was unusual. First my workplace, now the construction site. "I see you have a big project on your hands," he started as he stood up from my car. "Yeah, what are you doing here?" I asked. I scanned the crooked smile on his face as if I could find the answer on his face. "Don't look so disconcerted. How are you?" He spoke to me as if I were a longtime friend. His thick southern accent tickled me. "I'm fine. Busy," I shrugged as I gestured towards the site. "Well, don't let me hold you too long, Todd. I just had a proposition for you, thought you might be interested." Mr. Glass gleamed. Walter told me he was a business owner and made enough to retire early. Maybe he planned on starting up something new. "How do you know my name?" I asked, curious to know what he had in mind. "Come on, the Bellman Tower, Meadows Museum. Your work doesn't go unnoticed, my friend. And I gotta say, you have a keen eye for detail." I smiled at the unexpected compliment. "I have a structure in mind that I would love to have your assistance on," he continued. I removed my hard hat as the increasing heat hugged my face. I always appreciated people that admired my work. I started to become interested in what he had in mind. "Okay, well, I can't talk much right now, but maybe we can set up a meeting and see what we can do," I exclaimed, pulling my wallet out of my pocket. "I don't seem to have my business card on me," I rushed through as I continued to search. "I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again. I'll let you get back to your craft." He gestured behind me at the site. I looked back at the construction workers as they continued moving in the pile. "I look forward to working with you, my friend. I'm sure you'll work wonders with this." Behind me, Thomas sounded further away. I turned back around and saw he was already walking down the street. I began to feel at ease about the man with the cane. Chapter 7. Anthony's house stood still and silent in the fog as I peered out my window. A chill ran down the back of my neck as I lit a cigarette. Something didn't sit right just being here. I looked at the clock on the radio. 11:45 p.m. It has been 4 days now since last I heard or seen of him. I inhaled a deep breath and opened my car door. Anthony did pretty well for himself as the manager of a dental company. I looked over at the growing grass as I walked towards the front door. This was definitely not like him. Anthony liked a well-kept home. In fact, he was very obsessive about it. As I approached the door, I thought about the 4th of July get-together we had here 2 years ago. I couldn't help but notice the extra-organized set of spices in the kitchen that night. Even his magazine collection had been organized by titles. "Your contractor did a great job at the remodeling of this place," I said. I had admired the mosaic tiles that had replaced drywall in the living room. "Yeah, I would have asked you to do it if you hadn't gone into architecture," Anthony assured as he sat across the couch nursing his beer. "Hey, my baby's doing good as an architect. It's bringing in more than what that contracting job was." Alexis adjusted herself on my lap as she talked. "Speaking of contractors, Alexis, didn't you say you have a brother that was a contractor?" Walter's sister, Kara, asked as she made herself a second glass of wine. "Oh yeah, BJ used to be until he fell out a window on the job and dislocated his shoulder. He had to find another job. His arm wasn't right since," Alexis explained. She vaguely talked about her family. I never met her brother. She once told me that they fell out years ago after he kept stealing from her. Now that I think about it, I don't think I even saw him at our wedding. I had enjoyed these get-togethers we had. With everyone being so busy this year, we haven't had time for all of us to plan another one. I regained focus as I stood at Anthony's doorstep. I slowly knocked on the door. No answer. He had to be home. I could hear a football game running on TV in the living room. The neon doorbell was dimly lit next to the door as I pressed it. No answer. I walked around the side of the home to find some clue that he may be at home. The high grass had poked my ankles as I made my way back to the entrance. There was an echo of a female giggling coming from the bathroom. A familiar giggle was followed by the sound of the shower running. It was the same giggle from the woman he met at the bar. I exhaled with a sigh of relief. Just as I figured, Anthony had just been preoccupied with that woman. "All right," I thought aloud to myself, smiling. "He's all right." I chucked my cigarette and fished in my jacket pocket for my phone as I walked back across the street. Anthony's name was in my recent text history. "Call me when you come up from air, LOL. I sent the text to him as I got in the car. Walter's name appeared on the phone as the Super Mario ringtone played. "Did he answer?" Walter asked as I answered the phone. "No, but he's fine. I heard the shower running in his house. I think that woman Quinn is in there with him," I assured. It was silent on Walter's end. I would think he would react as relieved as I was. "Well, that's good. I still haven't spoken with AJ." He finally let out. Before driving off, I took another look at Anthony's house. "Did you stop by his house?" I asked. "Yeah, I did, but no one answered. The lights weren't on either. I guess he could be over his new friend's house." Walter referred to Janet from the bar that was all over AJ. I felt silly for even coming out here, but it was good to know they were okay. "You got me looking like Matlock out here doing all this detective stuff," I chuckled. I heard Walter laughing on the other end of the phone. "Hey man, I was concerned. You know, just that police instinct. They're usually bugging us 24/7 when we're not hanging out together," he joked. "Well, I guess you can say I'm going to make a disappearing act too. I'm meeting up with this woman I met the other night. She is sexy as hell." Walter's voice faded in and out as I entered a tunnel on my way back home. "What? You're breaking up," I yelled to my cell phone sitting on my lap. I had a mile before I would be able to get out of the tunnel. By the time I was halfway in, the signal was getting worse. I was only able to hear every other word. "Can't you—" It seemed like he was still talking as if he was unaware that I couldn't hear him. "Don't yet until built," he continued, barely audible. I had no idea what he was saying. At this point, I couldn't tell if he was on the same subject or was even still talking to me for that matter. Keeping my eyes on the road, I felt around my lap for my phone. The dim lights on the tunnel walls were not doing the road justice. It was still difficult to see the road. As I made a swift move away from the pothole ahead, I felt my phone slide off my lap. Damn, I mumbled to myself as I heard it tap against the floor. There was no signal now. I didn't hear Walter on the other end anymore. I took caution and fished for it. It sounded like the phone landed under the steering wheel, but I didn't feel it when I reached there. Still looking at the road, I made a second attempt running my fingers across the wet floor mat. This time, I tried reaching further. There was still no luck. What the heck? I finally decided to glance when it was safe. It stood upright against my left foot. How I didn't feel it, I'll never know. Shit! My heart did all but stop when the oncoming minivan honked its horn. I was only moments away from the bright headlights that were racing towards me. I swerved back into my lane as I tried to catch my breath. It can wait, I exhaled. I sat up in bed that night after one of my many strange dreams. There was always a dream involving me either jumping off some high platform or acting out a scene from a familiar movie. Tonight was rare. I had dreamed I was floating around in my house as Alexis kept yelling up at me to come down. I would cross my arms and shake my head in refusal. I enjoy it here and you can't make me. My voice was squeaky as I spoke in my dream. I kept taunting her, floating around the house, knocking every picture and decoration off the wall and shelves. The stern look on her face changed to terror as I made my way closer to her. I couldn't understand what made her so afraid of me. I had wondered if my dream portrayed me as a ghoulish and hideous creature. I had never seen Alexis look so afraid of anything in her entire life as she did of me. I couldn't help but wonder if it meant anything. I had always believed dreams come from some reality of what's to come or what has already happened. Have something about me changed in her eyes? Is that what the dream meant? My heart sunk as I started entertaining the thought of losing her over being as stubborn as I was in the dream. I picked up my phone from the nightstand and called her. It didn't take long for me to think of the near-death experience I had earlier on my way home over this phone. "Hey, baby, what are you doing up at 2:30 in the morning? Are you okay?" a groggy voice answered. "Hey, honey, I'm fine. For the most part, anyway. I almost came head-on with another car on my way home." I rubbed the crud out of my eyes as I adjusted myself on the bed. What happened?" she exclaimed with a failed attempt to sound more awake. Her voice was still coming in sleepily and in a way kind of seductive and sexy, too. I dropped my phone and was trying to get it off the floor. Almost hit a damn minivan. I dreaded what was coming up after the silence on the phone. I immediately wondered why I even volunteered that information. "I don't know how many times I done told you about that distracted driving. You keep on playing games with death and death is gonna win." I rolled my eyes as I listened to her lecture. But she was right. It wasn't the first time I almost had an incident in the car. Last time it was on our way to Ronnie's Steakhouse and I was trying to answer the phone while I was driving. I didn't even check my blind spot when I was trying to get over in the next lane. As much as I hate to admit, a lot of times she is right about her lectures. Most men would say this is nagging, but I get it. That's not what I called about, though. I paused, holding in a hiccup. "Are you happy with me? I mean, happy with the choice you made?" I asked. "Of course, boo. I love you, and I'm happy to spend the rest of my life with you. What could make you think I'm not?" I could hear ruffling of what sounded like a plastic bag. She must have picked up some chips. "I don't know. Just this dream I had." The paper bag couldn't sound any closer to the phone than it did at that moment. I was getting annoyed by the distracting sound. "What are you doing? I hear a bag moving around," I questioned. Oh, sorry. Just cleaning up around here. I had some snacks earlier. You know me, I don't like to give house cleaning too much work to do." I lay back down as I listened to her continue. "How was your first day at the site? You didn't even tell me about it when we talked earlier," she asked. "It was pretty good. We got some additional construction workers on board, too, so we can get the job done sooner than the expected completion date." My eyes could barely stay open now. I was ready to get back to sleep. I thought about the surprise visit from Mr. Glass at the site. "Remember that sale that Walter made, the one I had told you about?" I asked. "Yeah, what about it?" she sighed. I could hear something bumping around in the background now. I couldn't make out what she was doing anymore. Yeah, that same guy. His name is Thomas Glass. He wants me to help out with the blueprint of the building for his next business, I exclaimed. One of the things I enjoyed about my business was word of mouth. It's always good to hear someone putting in a good word for my business and referring others. Although I worked for a firm, I was still able to do freelance work on the side for others. Well, that's great, honey. What does he do? She sounded more enthused about it than I was. I think he did something in marketing and retired early. I don't know what his next business will be in. We didn't really have time to discuss it. He just showed up at the construction site. I began twirling the drawstring of my flannel pajama pants around my fingers. Between my fashion design blowing up and your architect work, baby, I gotta say we are doing pretty well for ourselves, she exclaimed. I'm glad to know God has blessed us to come from a couple of struggling black college students to successful entrepreneurs. My eyes were growing heavy as she continued to speak. I knew if I didn't get off the phone soon, she was going to start hearing some snoring. Nope, too late. Todd, she yelled. I jerked up, realizing I had nodded off. Go ahead and go to sleep. I have to get up early myself, she suggested. I couldn't agree with her more. Chapter 8. I stood in the living room as I stared blankly at the red voicemail light flashing on the house phone. I already knew who it was. It was my mom. We haven't been on the best of terms ever since my father died in the car crash when I was 17. It was the same night my father found out she had been having an affair with a guy from her job at Clarity Bank for 2 years. From what I had heard while I was in the kitchen, some random guy solicited my father pictures of my mother getting together with the other man Tuesday nights that she worked those overtime hours. I watched him storm out with luggage in his hand, but not before turning to me and belting out, "Tell your new dad I said good luck." His eyeglasses were so thick I could barely see the tears in his eyes. It was the last I saw of him. My last memory was my mother chasing his car down the street. Later that week, cops came to our door with the worst news of my life. They told us that he was caught in a crossfire between 2 gang members at the parking lot of McKinley's pub. That was the usual go-to place whenever my parents got into it and he needed to cool off. I always blamed her for it, and I never really forgave her. Alexis had to beg me to speak to my mother and ask her to attend our wedding. I took a deep breath and pressed the button. It was silent after the beep for a few seconds. I could hear her breathing into the phone. Hey, son. It's your mother. We really need to talk. Please call me, sweetheart. I know you've been hurting, but you have to let go. I am still your mother, and you only get one. Anyway, call me when you get this message. I love you. Her voice sounded shaky on the phone. Maybe I have been too hard on her, but I just couldn't shake the fact that she betrayed my father like that. And to make matters worse, he never would have left the house hadn't he found out. I decided to pick up the phone to check on her. I stared out the window as I listened to the constant ring on the other end. The one time I actually choose to respond sooner than later and she doesn't answer. I suddenly noticed a black Lexus pull up in my driveway. The windows were too tinted for me to make out who was driving it. I assumed it was a lost driver that just needed to turn around. But I was wrong. The driver didn't back out at all. I watched the car turn off and the front door open. I waited for the beep as the phone went to voicemail. Hey, Mom, I just got your message. Call me when you get the chance. I quickly hung up and went to the window to get a better look at who had just pulled up. The familiar cane appeared on the ground, followed by beige alligator boots. Thomas Glass was getting out and walking towards my front door. How the heck did he know where I live? I jumped back behind the curtains as he got closer. The doorbell rang as I walked towards the front. I opened the door to Mr. Glass's crooked smile and brown fedora. Good afternoon, Mr. Clemons. Lovely day, isn't it? I stared at him, befuddled. Yes, Mr. Glass, I began. Thomas held up his hand in defense. Please, call me Thomas. I'm nowhere near old enough to be called no mister, he interrupted. Thomas, how did you find my house? I inquired as I stepped outside with him. There's that look again, he quipped. Since we didn't get to exchange contacts, I had visited that office I found you standing in front of. Figured you worked there, so I went in and asked for you. They told me you were off, so I thought I'd look you up and pay you a visit. He took off his hat and fanned himself with it as he spoke. As I let myself further out on the porch, I had closed the door behind me. You know, there's phone numbers in the phone book, too. This is a little unprofessional to show up unannounced to someone's house, don't you think? I asked. His smile slowly faded. Behind him, I could see Brian across the street working on his car. I started to think if I could choose to have anyone knock on my door between the two of them, it would be Thomas. Look, Todd, I certainly didn't mean no harm in coming over. But when it comes to talking business, I do believe in face-to-face communication. You can tell a lot about what a person's intentions are and if they're genuinely interested by face expression. Although I still found it inappropriate to show up like he did make a valid point. Business is best done in person. If his work ethic and his method of doing business is what got him paid to begin with, who was I to question it? Letting my guard down, I finally asked, "So what can I do for you?" He gestured his open palm towards his car. "Since you have free time, I figured we can discuss the structure I've been working on." I stared at the car blankly. "The structure is your car?" I asked. He let out a loud chuckle as he dropped his hand back down to his waist. "No, you silly goose. I want to take you to go see what I'm talking about." I shook my head in embarrassment as I mustered up a smile myself. Of course. Sorry. Well, I guess I have some time today. I can come look at it with you," I stated. I backed up towards my front door and turned around to open it. My car keys were dangling on the hook just behind the door. I reached around for it and closed the door back behind me. As I followed Thomas down to the driveway, I saw Brian waving at me. I gave a formal wave back, and Thomas waved to him as well. "Looks like you got some friendly neighbors out here, Todd. You two know each other?" he asked. "Sorta, not really. We just say hi to each other in passing. He offered to hang out before, but my friends and I don't feel that comfortable around him." Brian mistook Thomas's wave as an invite to come over. "Why is that? Is something wrong with him?" Thomas asked in a lower voice as Brian made his way over. "He's just a little off is all," I whispered. "Hey, Todd, how's it going?" Brian asked as he stood with his hands on his hips. Hey, Brian, this is one of my clients, Thomas. Thomas, this is my neighbor, Brian," I introduced as they exchanged handshakes. "Howdy," Brian gleamed. He looked at Thomas as if he had never seen another human being in his life. He began to giggle and snort simultaneously. I pursed my lips and gritted my teeth at the sound of it. "Nice to meet you, Brian. Everything all right there? Looks like you got a case of the giggles." Thomas looked at me, bewildered. He couldn't understand why Brian was so amused. He searched my reaction for an answer. I was just as confused as he was. I shrugged my shoulders in response. "I just love your cowboy look. It's very Chuck Norris, Crocodile Dundee," Brian jeered. Thomas looked as if he didn't know whether to feel pleased or offended. "Yes, thank you, I think." There was an awkward pause between everyone. "Brian, Thomas and I were just on our way to a meeting. We're just going to catch up with you later, okay?" I finally let out. "That's a nice little car you got there. How's it running?" Thomas inquired as I inched my way towards my car. "Oh, it's getting there. Just waiting to come up with the money for a new head gasket, and it'll be purring like a kitten," Brian responded as he rotated his shoulder. Thomas peered across the street at the Camaro in the driveway. "Nice. Hey, maybe next time I see you it will be," he asked as if Brian was to promise it would. "You got it." Brian finally shook Thomas's hand one last time and jogged back across the street. Thomas turned his gaze back towards me. "He seems like a nice fella. A little quirky, but nice," he observed. "I don't know, something about him just don't sit right with me, you know?" Thomas clicked his tongue as he wagged his finger in the air. "You should never judge someone based off of a few quarks. He may come off odd, but everyone has a reason for something," he lectured as he opened his car door. "Well, thank you, Mr. Rogers," I joked, getting into my car. His chuckle trailed off as he backed out of the driveway. I started my car and proceeded to follow. Thomas honked his horn one time as Brian waved back at him with that same goofy grin on his face. Chapter 9. The trees in the forest had provided shade as we drove down Crane Road. I grew excited at the idea of helping put together yet another building for a big business. This would mean 2 projects at once. A first. I had trailed behind Thomas as he turned left into the extended driveway. The trail had to be at least a quarter-mile long. Just over the hill ahead I could see the home that was once burned down, now standing and in far better condition than it was. The geometric shape of the house added on a much more contemporary touch. Instead of just brick siding, the home had now been built in brick and glass. It has definitely been a while since I've seen this place, I mumbled to myself as I drove closer. I gazed up at the top of the home on the attic on the 3rd floor. The window had been shaped from a triangle to an octagon. At this point, we were isolated from the rest of the town. The home had been tucked away in this forest for years. With no streetlights to guide or any close contact to the outside community, it was obvious why people did not want the place. Thomas had parked ahead of me in the driveway. I turned off my car and hopped out. I see they did a lot of renovations on this place, I started. Thomas led the way as I followed him up the curved stairway to the home. Yeah, before it was a mess of a place. I'm glad they changed it. He stopped abruptly to admire the work on the home. Yeah, it's much better, he sighed. He turned around and looked at me with a big smile on his face. Todd, I truly do appreciate you taking time out of your day to come here with me. It's not easy finding quality architects willing to help out like this, he assured. I nodded my head in acceptance. Shall we? He gestured for me to enter the glass door first, as if I live here. I motioned over to open it when it automatically begun to swivel open itself. I smiled in amazement as I entered. I had never stepped foot inside the home even when it was in its old condition. Since the story of the fire broke out, people in the community drew their own superstitions from it. Each time the story would change. The ghost of the mom screams like a banshee on the 2nd floor as soon as it strikes midnight. Or if you light a campfire in the forest, you can see the spirit of the father in the flames. I walked across the timber ceramic tiling as I observed the renovation of the home. I have never been in a glass home before, I started. Really? You, an architect, have never been in a glass house before? Thomas asked as he made his way over to the black felt sofa across the living room. I was amazed to see how much work had been done just using glass. The skylight had let in a flood of sunlight in the home. My gaze made its way over to the glass staircase. So a glass house for Thomas Glass. I laughed at the coincidence. Beautiful, isn't it? I had them install the glass steps. I knew that would be a bonus. He started pouring himself a glass of wine. I turned my attention over to him in bewilderment. Wait, you had the place renovated? I asked. Thomas gazed at me with a look of content and continued to sip his wine. Of course, I wasn't going to buy it built the way it was. I gave them an offer they couldn't refuse, and voila, he chuckled. Come on, Todd, sit. Have a drink with me, he invited. I was so captured by the place I didn't even realize I hadn't sat down yet. I joined him on the matching chair adjacent to him as he handed me a spare wine glass. Yep, 2 double bedrooms, 2 baths, and an extra spare room in the attic, he bragged as he poured the wine for me. This place is pretty big for just one man, I managed to say shortly after my first sip. For me, the place couldn't be big enough. Besides, I do have family that I'd like to have out here with me. Thomas had twirled around his cane as he spoke. Oh, so you have a wife and children? I inquired, watching his cane spin in his hand. Nope, just siblings. I told them they can come and stay with me when the time is right, he chimed. I scanned the room once more as I started to speak. Well, from the looks of it, the timing seems pretty well, I said. Not quite, and that's where you come in. He had stopped twirling his cane and leaned over to support himself on it. See, with the last house being such a mess of a place, it just was not sustainable for that fire. I wanted to make sure my siblings would be safe in the case of such situation was to arise again. With that, he reached over the coffee table and pushed a white binder over towards me. I opened the binder to find floor plans and a rough sketch of a room. Like a panic room? I asked, scanning through the floor plan. Well, something to that effect, yes. He sat up closer to get a better view of the plan. I had envisioned a separate facility attached to the home of the east wing of the home. Thomas was pointing to significant points of the floor plan as he spoke. He supported himself on the cane, and he suddenly stood up. "Come on, I'll show you where I plan to have it," he offered. I stood up myself and followed along behind him. I let my fingers run across the granite countertop as we walked through the kitchen. The two large stainless steel doors in front of us at the end. "As you can see, I wanted to give an illusion of a restaurant-style walk-in freezer where, in fact, it will be a panic and safe room," he explained. There was a security keypad on the door that Thomas had used to unlock the room. The way the doors automatically opened reminded me of the doors at convenience stores. He allowed me to step in first as he trailed along behind me. The foundation had already been started. Where the walls and ceiling should be were only insulation foam and metal beams. "It looks like someone has started work on this already," I observed. "I had a contractor working on this room, but he bailed on me before he finished. Haven't seen or heard from him since," he explained. "You couldn't have just looked him up and tracked him down like you did me?" I quipped. He shook his head, but he wasn't laughing. "That guy went ghost on me. I couldn't find him anywhere." I nodded my head in an understanding gesture. "Thomas, you just need a contractor to finish this, not an architect. The plans are already drawn out, and it's already halfway done. At the most, this would take 5 days, tops," I explained. He limped as he motioned closer towards me. "You think I do business with people without looking up background information on them?" he asked, grinning. I stared at him blankly as he continued. "See, I know about your 2 years in contracting before you became a high-end architect, buddy. And I've seen your handiwork. Remember when I told you you have a keen eye for attention?" He pointed towards me as he spoke. I shook my head in disbelief. This was simple work, but this was not what I had in mind at all. I began to sink in a feeling of disappointment. This was clearly a waste of time. It wasn't going to be easy to let him down. He seemed like he was really looking forward to me doing this for him. "Thomas, I do appreciate you wanting me to do this job, but I'm just not into contracting anymore. I retired a long time ago. I only draw out and present plans for other contractors. I don't work in the field. Besides, I do have my hands full with other clients as well as overlooking the building of Lacer Hotel." His grin had immediately faded as I spoke. The last thing I wanted to do was let down a physically disabled man. "Todd, I know you're busy, and I'm glad you came out here with me. I just really feel that you could add a touch to it that no one else can. You have a gift, you know." I could see the disappointment on his face. His eyes lowered underneath the brim of his hat. As I started to speak again, he removed the hat from his head. "Look, how about this? I have connections to a lot of contractors. They would be more than happy to work on this room. I'll even make sure that they give you a discount on the work. It's the least I can do for all your trouble," I offered. Thomas sighed as he walked around the unfinished room. There was a stack of flame-retardant wall panels laid out on the floor. He stood silent as he tapped his cane against them. "I see," he finally let out, barely audible. There couldn't be a more awkward moment than this. At the same time, he is rich. It's not like he can't afford to just get someone else to do it. I watched him slowly walk past me toward the door. The silence was so uncomfortable I had to say something. But what else could I do? He seemed like a really nice guy. Maybe I'm being too selfish about it. This is only one project, even if it is just finishing putting up wall panels for him. The guilt was beginning to win over. He was just getting to the doorway as he limped on. I made up my mind. I'll help him. I rushed over to him to let him know. "Thomas, you know what? Let's go ahead and set up—" "Ah!" I screamed at the sudden attack. It happened so fast. I didn't even have enough time to process it. As I laid on the floor, I could feel a piercing pain run across my forehead. "Ow, what the—" I moaned. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I belted, still holding my head. "You hit me with your cane? Ow, the fuck!" I could only hear the footsteps of his alligator boots as I tried crawling to my feet. I stumbled back as I lost balance. "I recommend staying down. You're gonna need your strength for the next 5 days. Tops," he stated. The tone in his voice had changed from light and friendly to groggy and stern. "You think I'm going to work for you after this?" I finally was able to look up at him. I felt myself getting dizzy and faint. My vision was growing blurry as I watched him stand in the doorway. "And you can clear your schedule, by the way. You're not leaving here." I watched Thomas's blur disappear as the automatic doors began to close. "No, stop!" I pleaded weakly. I couldn't tell if I spoke loud enough or was even speaking out loud at all. Desperately, I tried picking myself up, but I was too dizzy to move. I could only watch the door close as I felt myself drift out of consciousness. Chapter 10. I opened my eyes to an empty, dark room. There was a faint but still painful throbbing across my forehead. As I laid down with my face to the floor, I knew I must have been hit bad because I could hear ringing in my head. No, wait. It's not in my head. It's in my pocket. "Shh! Shut up! Shut up!" I rushed in my pocket to try and mute the ringing. I finally took it out and silenced it. Alexis's favorite picture she had taken of herself on our honeymoon had appeared with the caller ID. "Oh, thank God," I whispered. "Baby, where the heck?" she started. I had no time for a lecture from her. I had to get her to call the cops as soon as possible. "Be quiet and listen closely," I interrupted. "What's going on and why are you whispering?" she asked. "I'm still at that guy Thomas Glass's house. He locked me in some panic room. I don't have a lot of time, baby. Call the cops." I heard a loud gasp on her end, followed by, "Oh my gosh." I looked up at the two small windows on the door, checking for Thomas to appear. All I could see was the moonlight beaming through the glass ceiling. I must have been out all day. "Where is he now?" she had to ask. "I don't know. He may be back at any minute. Hang up and call the cops for me, please, just in case I can't reach them. I love you," I said. "I love you too," she hung up shortly after. My hands were shaking as I struggled to enter 911. Suddenly the phone rang again. This time it was Walter. I did not have time to be answering calls. I had to get help. I pressed the ignore and continued to dial. It rang once again, interrupting me. "What the hell, Walter?" I whispered to myself. "Walter, I can't talk. I'm in serious trouble," I started. He then interrupted me mid-sentence. "Wait, what's going on? I went to your house and you weren't there. Where are you?" he asked. "Look, you were right about that Thomas Glass. He has been stalking me so I could build him a damn panic room," I explained. I paused and removed the phone from my ear to check out the window. "What? Well, where are you? You didn't agree to do it, did you?" I heard him exclaim on the phone. I placed the phone back to my ear as I continued to speak. "I thought he wanted to have a building drawn out for one of his marketing businesses. He didn't tell me what it was until I met with him at his home. He beat me with his cane and locked me in this room." I suddenly heard footsteps. I knew that man was strange. I knew it. I could hear Walter while the phone was away from my ear again. The footsteps were sounding far away. "I gotta go. I think he's here. Call for backup cops for me," I whispered into the phone. Walter didn't respond. "Hello? Walter, you still there?" There was dead air on the other end. I looked at the phone. Signal loss flashed on the screen. "No," I whispered. "I wasted my time talking to Walter and I didn't get to call the cops." I walked around the room holding up my phone in the air. There was no sign of getting any signal. The footsteps were now approaching the door. I quickly shoved my phone back in my pocket. I watched the double doors slowly open. "Where was my head at?" I heard Thomas's voice creep through as the door opened. He appeared in just a button-up shirt, vest, and dress pants. He was no longer wearing his brown hat. The moonlight had highlighted his brushed-in waves on his head. "Cell phone jammers. Gotta love it." He chuckled as he raised his tablet in the air in one hand, still leaning on his cane. "Now you can't get anything done babbling on the phone." I couldn't believe I got knocked out so easily by someone that can't even support himself without a stick in his hand. "Now, we're on a time crunch here. I can't get my family moved in until I know they are safe." Thomas had took a step closer inside the room. As I watched him standing in the doorway, anger and fear ran through my body at the same time. "I told you I'm not doing this," I said through clenched teeth. I looked at the ball on the end of his cane. I realized the only reason he made that knockout because I didn't see it coming. I was completely caught off guard by that swing, but this time I'm very much aware. "Oh, I think you will," he nodded. As he sat his tablet down on the wooden work table, I knew this was my shot at knocking him down and getting out of there. The opening was so clear I could practically feel myself hopping in my car and driving away from here. With the fire running in my stomach, I planted my feet firmly on the ground. This has to be timed perfectly to work. "There's something I want you to see," he started as he tapped the screen on his tablet. He looked up at me, waiting for me to respond. I watched, counting down in my head. 3. Come on now. "I know that hit ain't made your ass paralyzed. Get on over here and see this," he sneered. 2. His attention went back to the tablet. 1. I rushed towards Thomas with as much force as possible, knocking him over. His cane fumbled out of his hand as he fell. I snatched it away from him and began beating him with it. I didn't know how many times I had hit him, but it felt so good to do it. "Ah, stop it!" he yelled. Triumphant, I finally stopped and ran out the room. With half the house being glass, there wasn't a lot of light installed. I turned to my left to find the front door illuminated by a dimly lit bulb. Thank God, I thought out loud. I remembered the front door was also automatic. All I had to do was run, so I did just that. I thought about my wife as I ran. I smiled to myself, thinking of seeing her when she gets home in 3 days. I made it past the large kitchen and into the spacious living room. I thought of the projects that I had to do in the morning. Just a few feet closer. I ran even faster as I got closer to the door. I was suddenly stopped in my tracks by the front door. I had ran right into it. Apparently, Thomas had that door already locked too. Once again I was down. I laid on my back, dazed. I could hear Thomas laughing somewhere in the distance. "Bring him back over here," I heard him order someone. Was there someone else here? I thought he was living here alone. Who else is he talking to? I could hear footsteps getting closer towards me as I rolled over on my stomach to try to get up. I immediately felt a swift kick in my stomach. "Ugh!" I belted. No, you're not getting away that easily," I heard a familiar voice snort. I had heard this voice before, but I couldn't make out who it was. I was too dazed and in pain to analyze it. I looked up at the shadowy figure standing over me. He stood silently as he hovered. "Let me go," I started weakly. I promise I won't tell anyone. I just want to go," I pleaded at the shadowy figure. "Hey, stop stalling and get his ass back here," Thomas had yelled again from the room. "All right, I'ma do it," the figure yelled back. "No, wait. You don't have to do what he says. Just let me go," I whispered, trying to negotiate. "Sorry, boss's orders," he whispered, and with that he gave another swift kick, this time in my face. I must have blacked out again after that last kick. I think my head had hit the floor. My eyes had slowly opened. There was a skylight built in that I hadn't noticed before. I continued to blink rapidly as I watched the crescent moon. I sat up to find I was right back in the incomplete panic room. "Damn it," I started. I covered my face and rubbed my head, trying to think of a way out. "What am I going to do now?" I mumbled to myself. "I have a suggestion." I jumped back, startled by Thomas's voice. I looked to my right and saw him sitting against the wall. His cane laid across his lap as he sat with his legs stretched out. "Instead of fighting and running, you could start working," he began. "It's only difficult if you make it." I was getting ready to adjust myself when Thomas removed a 9mm gun from behind. "Don't even think about trying anything," he said. My heart sunk in my chest as I saw the gun. I never really have seen a gun in person. My father never even carried a gun. I had remembered storming in my parents' house when I was in the 10th grade. One of my classmates was a bully to me and my friends. He had tormented me since the first day I stepped foot in the high school doors. I wanted to make that school year bully-free. I remembered rushing in my parents' room, tear-filled, and opening their closet door. "Where is it? Where is it?" I shouted, pulling down shoe boxes off the shelves. I had checked every box for a gun. "Where's what, son?" My dad looked at me bewildered. "The gun! Where is it?" I answered as I rushed over to his dresser. Whoa, hold on." He started pulling me away from the dresser and had turned me around to face him. "First of all, we don't carry guns in this house. Secondly, who do you plan on using it on?" he asked sternly. I wiped my nose as I began to speak. This junior named Greg Matthews. He always pushes me around, and when I try to say something, he beats me up on my way home, I explained. My dad looked at me with pity. The last thing I wanted him to think was that his son was a punk that can't handle his own. Todd, I don't know why you haven't told me about it sooner. Don't ever feel like you can't come to your old man. And we don't kill. You understand? I sniffed and nodded my head. I didn't want to kill him, just scare him a little, I explained. He looked at me in disappointment. You want to scare someone? You get me. He chuckled. It was ironic that the very thing he worked so hard to protect me from using had also killed him. I sat across from Thomas as I stared at the gun in his hand. Now where was I? He waved the gun around as he spoke. Oh, I believe before you had made that little dash for the door, I told you that you would finish this for me, he said. And surely you don't need a reason why, do you? I knew he was making the reference to his gun. But for the heck of it, why don't I just give you another reason? He reached for his tablet that sat beside him and tapped the screen. He then turned the tablet around and placed it on his lap with the screen facing me. The screen went from black to a video playing. In the video, Thomas was shown sitting on my sofa in the living room of my home. He smiled that same seemingly innocent smile. Hello there, Todd. I was afraid you would say no, being such a big architect now and not a contractor. My eyes occasionally shifted back and forth from the video and the physical Thomas sitting in front of me. In the video, Thomas had sighed as he spun his cane around on the floor. I thought this video would make a great motivator, he said. He stood up and began walking as he talked. You see, this is very important for me, and maybe it's not important to you. He leaned on the backrest of the chair at my desk where someone was sitting. I could only see the back of the woman's head since the chair was turned away from the camera. It sounded like she was either sobbing or giggling. It was hard to tell with her barely audible. So I made a point to make it important to you. He spun the chair around. I stared at the screen in shock with my mouth dropped open. Thomas had reached behind him, pulled out his gun, and pointed at her head. My heart dropped as I watched Alexis sobbing at the end of the gun. Chapter 11. I was confused to see her there. She still had 3 days before coming back. Baby, I choked. Sweetheart, I don't know what's going on, she sobbed between words. I was trying to surprise you by showing up early. I hope you're okay. Just please, please do what the man says. He said every time you refuse, they will torture me and kill us both, she cried. Start now, Thomas in the video exclaimed. Just before the video ended, he smacked her across the side of her head with the gun. You son of a bitch! I jumped up ready to rush him again. I had stopped in my tracks when he raised his gun. Where is she? What did you do to her? I yelled. Don't worry. She's in safe hands as long as you finish, he answered calmly. I felt helpless. I couldn't believe my wife was in danger right along with me. She had nothing to do with this. She doesn't deserve to be taken hostage. I took a few steps back as tears ran down my face. I had no choice. I scanned the room and spotted a pile of tools in the back corner. I walked over to them and knelt down. My tears had landed on the power drill as I picked it up from the pile. Okay, I started. I wiped my face as I stood up. I'll finish it, I said meekly as I continued to look at the tools. Thomas was already standing. Excellent, he exclaimed. He turned and made his way out the door. Well, I'll leave you to it, he said as he entered the security key in the door. I sighed in defeat as I picked up a piece of wall panel. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll get us out of here, I mumbled as I began drilling. The next 2 days had been nothing but a consistent routine. I get up in the morning and go straight to work. I was only served ham sandwiches and water while Thomas would have full-course meals of pork steaks, potatoes, and grilled veggies as he observed me working. When I had to use the bathroom, I was escorted to the nearest one in the hall on the other side of the kitchen. There were no naps in between working. I didn't really want to rest. I would try to stay up as much as possible so I could finish as much as possible. I measured the last wall panel left in the stack. There was only enough to cut 2 more sections. I need more wall panels. I'm running out, I said as I double-checked the measurements. Thomas had been standing in the far corner of the finished part of the room. He ran his hands along the wall as he admired the texture. "Almost there," he mumbled to himself. "Did you hear what I said? I don't have enough wall panels. I need to get more to finish," I sighed. Thomas turned his gaze towards me. "Are you kidding me? Damn it!" He stumped his foot and cane at the same time. "Those were left by the contractors. I thought they had gotten enough." He continued shaking his head. He started pacing back and forth, holding one hand to his hip. "All right." He stopped abruptly. He looked at me as if he had the best idea. "We just gonna have to go shopping," he exclaimed. He removed his gun holstered inside his pants. He aimed the gun towards me as he walked closer. "Lead the way," he grinned. As I turned to walk out, I could feel the cold steel poking through my undershirt. We walked out to the driveway where both my Jeep and his Lexus had been sitting. I had begun to fantasize about making a run for it, getting in my car and driving off. "I don't think you'll be needing these since I'll be driving," he said as he dangled my car keys in my face. Grabbing my shoulder, he had pushed me over to the passenger side. I looked at the house in front of me as I climbed in the car. I shook my head in disappointment in myself. Why did I agree to meet up with this deranged man? As we rode down Lancaster Avenue, I thought about the idea of being out of that room and away from this glass house. It has been almost a week since I've been outside. It had dawned on me that I haven't been to work at all. I haven't been at home at all. If I'm of any importance to my coworkers and my boss, maybe they have checked on me. What about my neighbors? Would they have noticed suspicious inactivity? Has it even been long enough to be considered missing? My mind continued to wander as I gazed helplessly out the window. We had already passed by 2 cops. With the windows up and locked and me being handcuffed, I was out of luck. I always saw this stuff on the news. I would watch the stories of people who had gone missing and found weeks after being held hostage. I would think about what the person must have felt like to be escorted by this killer in their own community, and no one would bat an eye that something was wrong. It made me wonder if that's what I've become. A prisoner in my own town. As we passed by homes, I had imagined families nestled close on the couch watching the news of the missing Clemons family. The only person that knew of my predicament was Walter. He was my only hope of saving Alexis and I. He had to have called the cops or looked for me by now. But why hasn't any cop showed up? We had arrived at Bob's Depot. As Thomas had parked the car, I had scanned the pedestrians in the parking lot. If there was any luck, I could try and mouth out, "Help me," to anyone who would look in my direction. I then remember I had the windows tinted 2 months ago. There would be no use. "Now," Thomas began as he turned off the engine, "I'm going to go in here and get them wall plates. When I come back, I bet not see no signs of you trying anything funny, you hear?" I gave him the coldest look I could muster, and with that, Thomas had gave me an even colder one. "And if I see one thing out of the ordinary, I will shoot your dick off in this parking lot." He spoke through clenched teeth as he pressed his gun into my crotch. If there ever is a devil, it would be the man staring back at me. "Do I make myself clear?" he asked. "Crystal," I answered. I watched as Thomas crawled out of the Jeep and limped over to the front entrance of the warehouse. Today seemed more busy than usual. So many people were walking past the Jeep as they entered and left the place. At the front entrance, I could see the missing persons poster. I scanned the poster as I imagined a picture of me on it. Just then, a familiar face walked past the poster, blocking my view. It was my neighbor, Brian. He stood in front of a food cart just outside the entrance. It dawned on me that this could be my chance to escape. Okay, I mumbled to myself. My heart was beating rapidly as I tried to think of a way to catch his attention. The Jeep was parked close enough to the front to where it could be seen from the building windows. My attention shifted from the window to Brian. I couldn't see Thomas anywhere near the front yet. I had to act fast. This may be my only shot at being free. As Brian searched his pocket to pay the vendor, I looked around the car for a way to get out of the car. I realized I had only been handcuffed, but my legs were still free. Using my upper body weight, I had rocked myself over as far to the driver's side as possible. I was just barely close enough to the door to reach the window lock buttons. I stretched my arms out as much as I could. I still couldn't reach it. "Come on," I sighed. I began to panic when I saw Brian walking away from the stand. I used my weight again. I made it further. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest from adrenaline. He was getting further away. I desperately banged on the window. "Brian! Brian! Help!" I yelled. He turned around with a lost look on his face. I could tell he couldn't figure out where he was hearing his name. I finally was able to unlock the window. "Brian!" I said, this time not as loud. I looked back once again to check for Thomas. He still was nowhere in sight. Brian looked at me bewildered. He smiled as he walked over. "Hey, Todd, I haven't seen you in a while. How's it go?" I raised my hands up for him to stop talking. "Help me. I'm being held captive." I spoke as low as possible as I showed my handcuffed hands. He looked at me in disbelief. "Oh my God," he exclaimed. "Okay, look, I'm going to unlock this door and we can walk quickly to your car." I looked at Brian pleadingly. Okay, he agreed. I looked back one more time. Thomas was standing at the checkout counter with a large cart of wall panels. "Damn it," I exclaimed as I unlocked the car door. Brian helped open the door for me. I stumbled behind him as we rushed to his Camaro. "Man, this was the best day for my car to start working, huh?" he said as he opened the driver's side door. The car was only a two-door, so he had to pull down the driver's side seat. I slid in the back seat with my hands still cuffed. "Please, hurry," I snapped. I looked at my Jeep as Thomas walked out with an employee helping with the cart. He stopped to look around when he noticed the driver's side door open. Brian had backed out and drove off the lot as quickly as possible. As we got further down the street, I sat back and exhaled in relief. "Thank you," I sighed. "No problem," he responded as he looked at me through the rearview mirror. "That's quite a pickle you got yourself into. Thank goodness I was there, huh?" he chuckled. I suddenly thought about Alexis in the video. She was still held hostage by someone at my home. I had to get to her. "Do you have a cell phone? Can you call the cops?" I asked. "Sorry, buddy, I don't have a phone on me." I saw his eyes shift back and forth from the road to the rear view. "Can you just take me home? I need to get to my wife," I said. "Oh, yeah, that's right, Alexis," he exclaimed. "She's such a nice woman. You really made a great choice with her." I rolled my eyes. I was feeling drained from the extra work put into that panic room. "Thank you," I sighed. He continued rambling as I closed my eyes. "Good thing I got you when I did. I remember a time my life was in danger when I was like 11 years." He started before I had cut him off. "Brian, I'm extremely tired," I interrupted. "I appreciate you saving me. I just want to sit in silence. Can you just take me to my wife?" I asked. There was awkward silence. "Okay, boss's orders," he finally responded. "Thank you," I repeated. Silence filled the car. At that moment, I opened my eyes and lifted my head. "Wait, what did you just say?" His eyes were no longer looking at me in the rear view. I had remembered the same words from the shadowy figure back at Thomas's house. My heart began racing again. I looked out the window. This was not the direction to my house. "Brian, where are you taking me?" I asked. "To see Alexis," he answered, keeping his eyes on the road. "This isn't the way home," I said. "She's not there," he snapped. His voice sounded monotone. "How do you know where she is?" I stammered. My heart was beating even more. "I'm sorry, Todd, but you still have some work left," he said. I looked at him through the mirror wide-eyed. No, I whispered to myself. "Brian?" It was a self-explained question. "Are you involved in this?" My question had been answered. When I looked at the road, I couldn't breathe as I saw that we were turning into Crane Road. Chapter 12. "You're a part of this?" I asked. This couldn't be happening. But somehow it was. I was beginning to feel like I was trapped in a nightmare. As we entered the forest through the long path, I used my body strength to push myself against his back seat. "No, you take me home right now, Brian. Take me to my wife," I belted. "I told you she isn't there," he began calmly. "And we are home," he continued. I lost my balance, hitting my head on the back window as Brian made a sharp turn into the driveway. As he parked the car, I looked up to see Thomas standing in front of my Jeep. The back door was open with wall panels lying inside. I didn't even realize Brian had stepped out of the car when I suddenly felt his hands around my ankles. I struggled to kick him off as he pulled me. I finally managed to kick him in the face as I got closer to the edge of the seat. I stood up, trying to make a run from them. There was a sudden gunshot fired. I dropped down as my face hit the concrete. I was sure I was shot, but I was still alive. In fact, I didn't feel any pain anywhere other than the pain in my face after falling. Thomas didn't shoot at me. He shot in the air. "I thought we had a deal, Todd," I heard Thomas as he walked closer to me. "I keep you and your wife alive. You build the room." He pushed me with his cane as I rolled over on my back. I felt the blood run from my nose. I was sure it was broken. "Now you're still alive, and I still don't have my room finished." He clicked his tongue through his teeth as he looked down on me. The handcuffs felt like they had tightened against my wrist. "So what, you're going to kill me?" I boldly asked. The sun was shining in my eyes as I struggled to see the expression on Thomas's face. "And not get my room finished? I won't give you the satisfaction," he scoffed. "But I do recall a promise I made you." Thomas had stood directly over me and raised his gun between my legs. "I believe that promise was if you make any move in that car, I would shoot your danglers. You can kiss them goodbye." I squirmed around, trying to get away from underneath him. "No, wait, please," I pleaded. Brian suddenly rushed to Thomas's side. "Thomas, no," he exclaimed. "He's no good to us if he ain't mobile. Leave him be." Thomas reluctantly lowered his gun. "Yeah, you're right, B," he said. Thomas had turned his attention towards me again. "You should be thankful. My brother just saved you," he said. Brother? I began to grow dizzy in confusion. This could not be happening. I've been neighbors with this man for years. It dawned on me that Walter and I were right about Brian. I knew I was right not to hang around him. Brian giggled that strange giggle again. At that moment, Thomas lifted his cane and pressed it down between my legs. "Ah!" I yelled. I squirmed as much as I could to get from beneath his cane, but he continued to press his weight. "For now," he continued. He then lifted his weight and took a step back. "Get him up," Thomas had ordered Brian. I coughed as I rolled over. Lying in fetal position, I rocked back and forth, holding myself. Brian kneeled down and grabbed me by my arm. Thomas handed the gun over to Brian. "I don't understand. I got your wall panels for you," Thomas started as he removed the keys to the handcuffs from his pocket. "And this is how you thank me. That's okay. Just know whatever we don't do to you, we will do to your wife." Brian had put the gun to my head as Thomas removed the handcuffs. "Y'all won't get away with this, Thomas," I said weakly. The blood from my nose was still running over my lip. I could taste the blood on my tongue as I spoke. "There are people out there looking for me, and they will find me." Brian and Thomas laughed at my protest. "No, Todd, they won't," Brian said as he continued to laugh. We were now standing behind my Jeep where the wall panels were sitting. I stood in silence staring at the house. I dreaded going back in. "Well, get to it." Thomas gestured for me to start removing the wall panels. There was just no escape. At this point, I didn't know if they really would let me and Alexis go even if I did finish that room. The extension of the room needed work on the outside as I continued to work that night. The foundation was not as sturdy as it needed to be. I couldn't believe I was putting in so much into this extension. It seemed easy enough just to do a bad job and get my wife and I out of here. I had underestimated his knowledge in contracting and construction. Turned out he had majored in architecture before becoming a multi-level marketing millionaire. The sunset had given a pink and orange hue on the timber roof. The heat was still pretty high. It suddenly occurred to me that I hadn't showered in days. "Phew, funky," I heard Brian yell at the bottom of the ladder. He stood close by with his shotgun ready in case I tried any escape. "We should have threw some water and soap on your ass," he jeered. His hysterical laughter pierced my ears. I hadn't gotten much sleep and I was feeling extremely drained. Having Brian as my warden was the last thing I needed. I rolled my eyes as I fanned my sweat-stained t-shirt. I stopped my work and turned towards him. He continued staring at me with a cheesy grin. "I gotta ask," I started. I tightened my grip on my drill as I fantasized about jumping down and using it on Brian's head. "Why didn't you tell me Thomas was your brother?" I knew it was a dumb question. The answer was clear. They're brothers. "I plead the fifth," he snorted. Thomas had been in the house the rest of the day on the phone. I had no idea who he was talking to. All I heard when I was close to him was, "It's almost ready," And give me a couple of days, damn it. He didn't say he had siblings moving in. Brian was already here. I imagined he had been speaking with another brother. Suddenly, as I turned to continue, I missed a step on the ladder and slipped. I watched the ladder as it became further and further away in view. "Timber!" I heard Brian yell as he laughed. My body fall was broken by soft spots on the ground. I still felt a sharp pain in my spine as I lied on the ground. "Ow, my back!" I yelled. I could barely move. My leg had missed the drill by 6 inches. "Come on, handyman, get on up." Brian stood over me as he nursed his gun. I rolled over to get up when my hand suddenly sunk into the ground. The log beneath the dirt had stopped my hand from going any further. My fingers slid down the log as I struggled to get up. The log had felt unusually smooth. I paused to run my fingers further down the log. My heart had sunk in my chest when I felt my fingers met by another set of fingers. Shit! Startled, I had struggled to get up. The harder I tried, the more I felt myself sinking into the dirt. At this point, my face was so far in I could taste the dirt. I tried yelling, but it was immediately muffled. As I fought to get up, I could feel more body parts emerge from the ground. There was a tight grip around my ankles. I was being pulled out. Oh, my God! I tried catching my breath so I could recover from the panic attack. Brian stood laughing and slapping his chest uncontrollably. Standing next to him, I saw Thomas step out with a stern look on his face. "What the fuck was that?" I asked, panting. "I hate you had to see that guy," Thomas said, staring blankly. My question was suddenly, who was that? I turned my head to take one more glance at the sunken ground. Staring in horror, I saw Anthony's face in the dirt. Chapter 13. There was a hollow feeling in my stomach. My chest was tightening as I continued to gasp for air. It was a sight that was hard to bear, yet I couldn't look away from it. Anthony lied there, motionless, lifeless. The faint stench that I had assumed was me had become much more potent from Anthony. "Anthony," I choked. I was so sure that he was alive when I checked on him at his home. "What did you do?" I asked. My eyes had shifted back and forth between Thomas and Brian. "We had to eliminate any distractions," Thomas responded. He stared back at me blankly as if I had only asked for the time. "But why? What did he have to do with any of this?" I glanced once more at Anthony's decomposed body. Without warning, I had regurgitated. "You're not dedicated enough to your work, Todd. We want to make sure that your mind is always on the job," Thomas explained. Brian giggled to himself as he rotated his shoulder. "Those ladies were paid a pretty penny. I couldn't get them off your back alone." Thomas was referring to Janet and Quinn. Something about their random and sudden interest in AJ and Anthony just didn't sit right with me. "I can't believe it," I whispered as I held my stomach. I had a feeling I was not done hurling up more sandwiches. "I was just at his home. He was in the shower," I mumbled out loud to myself. "He must be talking about that night when we had to clean the blood from the tub all night," I heard Brian whispering to Thomas. I began to wonder just how long had I been watched by Thomas and Brian. I thought about the first day Brian moved in, just months after the Milton family who had lived there before him moved out. Alexis and I were coming home from our honeymoon in Cambodia. Alexis was always excited to see new neighbors. She was the type that had to greet them with batches of fresh-baked cookies as a housewarming gift. I didn't judge her for it, but I just wasn't the very social type with strangers. "Hi, we're the Clemons. We just live across the street," she had exclaimed the day as we stood on Brian's driveway. He had been in the middle of moving boxes from the rental truck. Alexis had a batch of her best gooey butter cookies that I had always enjoyed so much. Brian was carrying his 5th box when he stopped in his tracks. He placed the box down to shake our hands. "Hey, how are you?" he greeted, rotating his shoulder as he shook my hand. "We just wanted to be the first to welcome you to the neighborhood. I'm Alexis, and this is my husband, Todd," Alexis introduced. "Well, nice to meet you guys. I'm Brian. This is a pretty quiet neighborhood," he observed as he scanned the street. "Yep, that's what had attracted us to this place." I pointed towards our 2-story brick home. "There's not too much activity here, so you can always feel safe," Alexis chimed in as she handed Brian the plate of cookies. "Well, that's good, 'cause I'm definitely hate to have to move in and find out we have psychos running around here," Brian had chuckled. He rotated his shoulder once again. "What's wrong with your shoulder?" I asked as I lit my cigarette. Alexis had nudged me in the side and looked at me in embarrassment. "Todd," she scolded. Brian waved his hand nonchalantly. No, it's fine. I get that a lot," he reassured. "I have fell out of a window as a child and dislocated my shoulder. I had never recovered quite the same since," he explained. "Wow, sorry to hear that." The smoke had escaped my mouth and nose as I spoke. Brian stepped aside to stay clear of it. "Todd, can you put that away, please?" Alexis asked. Although she was rubbing my arm gently as she asked, the scolding stare she gave me was speaking in a much different tone. I dropped the cigarette on the sidewalk and put out the blaze with my foot. "You know those things can kill you," Brian advised, as I was now looking at him in discernment. Last thing I needed was one more person giving me these public service announcement speeches about smoking. "Don't even try it. I tell him all the time, but he just does it anyway," Alexis said. "He just won't be happy till he coughs up a lung," she continued. There was awkward silence between everyone before someone finally spoke up again. "Well, I may be having a housewarming party this weekend. Y'all welcome to come," Brian suggested, switching the plate to his left hand. "Sure, we'll be more than happy to join," Alexis volunteered me before I could even respond. We all exchanged a final "see you later," followed by handshakes before Alexis and I heading back across the street. "He's such a nice guy. You ought to invite him to hang out with you and the guys," Alexis advised as we continued to the house. "I'm not sure yet. I just met the guy. First impressions aren't always what they seem, baby," I explained. As I held the door open for her, I looked back at Brian across the street. He had still been standing there in the same spot staring at us. Once he saw me look at him, he quickly turned away and continued to his house. Chapter 14. Thomas sat silently in his chair across the room from me as he read his Sunday paper. He had one hand holding the edges of the pages with the newspaper being supported by his cane, while the other hand was nursing his shotgun. "See anything interesting?" I asked with my mouth full of ham sandwich. I always watched as I ate to make sure it wasn't using the time to try to plan some escape. This had become routine with us like this. Quiet meals in the afternoon with Thomas watching me. Every Sunday he would check the paper for any coverage of me being reported missing. He peered over at me over the top of his reading glasses, briefly providing me with an exasperated look on his face, then returned his attention back to the paper. For a guy that's so young, he sure had some old man qualities about him. I was often curious to know myself if anyone had been looking for me. "Humph," Thomas had hummed aloud as he gave a look of concern. "Well, it looks like your team seems to be doing just fine without you overseeing them." He glanced back at me as he spoke. I looked at him with a grimace as I continued to chew my food. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Thomas tossed the newspaper across the room toward me so I could see the article he was reading. The article had featured the progress of the Lacer Hotel that I had designed. My plans for this hotel had won over so many other architects, but my chances of seeing its finished product had now seemed far from possible. From what I could read in the cut-off print in the article, the construction had been put on hold due to missing floor plans I had left for them. Apparently, they've been trying to reach me to get a copy and cannot continue working until they do. There was finally beginning to be some hope that people might start reporting me missing and rescue me. It was a relief to know that I was thought of in some way. I returned my gaze back to Thomas as I made a failed attempt to hold back a smirk. "This isn't the least bit amusing, Todd," Thomas snarled as he pointed his cane towards me. "I'm not having nobody running any wild goose chase looking for you." He rose from his chair, still clutching his gun. "You can't stop this!" I exclaimed. I was feeling a sense of victory. There was nothing he could do now. He could kill me and Alexis, but people will still look for us enough to catch him. "They will find us and you will be caught. There's nothing you can do about it now." I waved the newspaper as I began to stand up myself. "You might as well let us go and surrender now." I hadn't realized I'd been smiling until I stopped. Thomas had suddenly began laughing hysterically. I shook my head in confusion. I couldn't understand why he found my comments so funny, or maybe he was just that deranged to laugh for no reason. I started to back away as I noticed Thomas making his way towards me. "Todd, I have enough money to shut anyone up, including you. That's how much the world cares about your ass," he snickered. I was disgusted by his arrogance. No amount of money could ever keep me quiet about this or anyone else. I knew that much. "No," I protested. "You're so wrong. I don't want your damn money, and it won't keep me, Alexis, or anyone else quiet." Thomas swiftly moved closer and raised his gun to my neck, pressing me against the wall. His hot breath burned my eyes and panted heavily. "So you think you got it all figured out, huh?" he snarled. His cold hazel eyes looked directly into mine. I struggled to release myself from his grip as I tried to gasp for air. "Don't nobody give a shit about you. Me and them sandwiches are the only friends you got in this world, so you better stay on my good side," he continued. I kept trying to fight his gun off my neck enough to breathe. I was beginning to feel faint. "They're gonna find us, and they're gonna lock your ass up," I managed. Thomas had let out another burst of laughter. "You think I care about prison? I've been there, and it was nothing for me. How you think I know how to give such a good prison experience for you?" He chuckled, breathing in my face. "Now, if you really want a good prison experience, I can do that for you, too," he jeered, holding the gun closer to my neck. I looked at Thomas, bewildered as he began making kissing faces at me. He laughed once more before finally releasing me from his hold. "Man, I love fucking with you," he exclaimed. I dropped to the floor, coughing as I regained air in my lungs. As I looked down, I could hear Thomas's footsteps get closer to me. He knelt down in front of me as he began to speak again. "Like I said, I'm not going to let anyone go looking for you," he started. "I'll go ahead and let you go," he continued. I raised my head at that last sentence. My heart was growing with excitement and hope at the sound of it. For those 2 seconds, it was good to hear until it was followed by, "But I'm coming with you." Chapter 15. Thomas and I had arrived at the construction site of Lacer Hotel. Thomas had made a call earlier today to my architect firm on my behalf to let Stephen know I was doing okay, and I have been in talks with Thomas on another project all this time. Stephen, as well as other colleagues, agreed to meet with us and the construction crew to give us an in-person apology for my absence. We were parked just across the street from the site. I gazed in amazement at the live progress of my plans as I sat handcuffed in my own Jeep. "Look, we're just here to tell him that you're doing just fine. Just give him the floor plan copy and go. Got it?" Thomas directed as he unlocked the cuffs. Even though I was nodding my head in agreement, I knew I had a different agenda. Thomas grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the car as he tucked the handcuffs in his back pocket. I felt the 9mm pressed against my rib cage as he began to walk across the street. "Don't even think about trying anything again," Thomas whispered as we got closer to the crew standing in front of the building. I forced a smile as we finally made our way to the crew. Thomas had removed the gun discreetly and tucked it in his holster. Out in this part of Texas, it was common to see people carry around guns holstered on their hip. There wasn't anyone fazed by the fact he had one. Stephen stood front and center as others gathered around to listen to us. "It certainly is nice to see you alive and well, Clemons," Stephen began as he stood with his arms folded. "Thank you, Stephen," I said, nodding my head. There was an awkward silence that filled the area that we all stood. Everyone was staring intently, waiting for me to explain. I turned back to look at Thomas. That same fake, innocent, crooked smile I've once before had appeared underneath the brim of his hat. He stood steady with his hands on his hip. I had noticed his right hand was holding his gun on his belt. My gaze went back to his eyes as I searched for his thoughts. Thomas nodded his head and tilted his hat in a way of telling me to continue. "I want to thank you all for coming out here today. I'm sure you've all been wondering where I've been and why I haven't taken any calls," I started. It was difficult to look my colleagues in the eyes, knowing that I may never see them again. This may be my last public appearance ever. I clutched the floor plan duplicates in my hand as I continued, gaze at everyone. Along with this project, I have been busy taking on another project for my friend here, Thomas Glass. The words I spoke left a bad taste in my mouth. I could never consider this man a friend, but I had to play the part to keep myself and anyone else around me safe. There was no telling what Thomas might do if I exposed him and told the truth. I couldn't risk other people's lives just to attempt to save my own. "What's the project?" Stephen inquired, smiling at us. Stephen considered himself a fan of my work, even if it wasn't under the firm. I cleared my throat to give time to think of an answer. Thomas stepped up beside as I began to answer the question. "A prison," he exclaimed, still standing with his hands on his hips. "I have bought a nice amount of land just outside the city to build one," he continued. I looked at Thomas in confusion at his answer. I had wondered, out of all places, a place he belongs. "Well, that's pretty neat. It's definitely a big floor plan to put together," one of the construction workers had chimed in. Thomas had nodded his head in agreement as he continued to speak of this imaginary prison. "We're going to make sure we have the state-of-the-art work on this. You know, some of these prisons here just ain't stable enough to hold inmates. You hear too many stories of people breaking out," he explained. "These crazy, dangerous folks running around killing or families and doing God knows what else," he preached. I stared at Thomas, bewildered. I was beginning to grow sick to my stomach at how he can speak against exactly what he's doing. I listened as people let out yells of, "All right," and "Ain't it the truth?" as if they were hearing a church sermon. I began to grow frustrated with the facade Thomas was putting on for everyone. "Todd is helping me design the best maximum security money can buy to make sure these thugs and psychos do not escape," he said as he placed his hand on my shoulder. With that, applause filled the crew. I forced a smile as I watched their faces and listened to their comments. I raised my hand to calm their claps as I began to speak. "Now, I do have copies of the plan. I have made these in the case of such a situation," I started. "I won't get in y'all asses this time about losing my floor plans. I know things happen," I quipped. I began to feel calm as I listened to the gentle laughter of everyone. Everyone except Daryl. I noticed him standing 2 people behind Stephen. Daryl had stood still with his hands in his pocket. Given the cold stare he volunteered, it was clear he still hasn't gotten over my design was chosen over his. At that moment, it occurred to me that he never gotten over it. I looked back at Thomas, who still had his hand on my shoulder. He looked at me with his own cold stare as to remind me not to try anything. Just then I remembered Daryl's last words that night at my party. "It would be that much sweeter watching you fall," ran over and over in the back of my mind. This all began to make sense to me. I had figured it out. Daryl had hired Thomas and Brian to keep me busy and out of the picture in hopes that Stephen would stop the work on my plan and choose his plan to finish. This was beyond low for Daryl. Was he really that jealous that he wanted to get rid of me? For good? Was he so jealous of my life he wanted me to suffer and have Alexis and I dead? I was now fuming with anger and rage. All of this for his own come-up? I should have known to look at Daryl. He was the only one I know that would have motive to plan this. Daryl continued to stare at me, and this time I returned the cold stare back. I suddenly thought about Alexis. I had wondered what she might be going through and where she really could be. I came to one conclusion. Daryl has her. At that moment, all I could see was red. I reached around Thomas and removed his gun as I bolted through the crowd towards Daryl. Chapter 16. A rush of gasps and screams filled the crew and colleagues as I lunged myself at Daryl. His cold stare had now become cold fear. I didn't realize how fast I was running until I stumbled and knocked down Daryl with me. "Todd, what the hell are you doing?" I heard Stephen yell behind me. I didn't care about Thomas getting caught or what would even happen to me anymore. All I could think about was Alexis and why Daryl had been doing this to us. I found myself sitting on Daryl, throwing blow by blow of punches in his face. The crowd scattered when they realized the gun was in my hand. "Get the fuck off!" Daryl cries as he struggled to block my blows. I grabbed his shirt with one hand while my other hand held the gun to his chin. "Where is she? Where is she, you son of a bitch?" I hadn't noticed I was crying until I saw my tears fall on Daryl's shirt. "Who? I don't even know who you're talking about," he yelled. I felt his hand shaking as he tried to move my arm. "You know what I'm talking about, damn it. You set me up so you can take the project." Daryl looked at me befuddled. I was so full of rage I couldn't tell if he genuinely didn't know or if he was putting on an act. Thomas had made his way towards me through the crew. I could hear him kneeling down beside me through my peripheral vision as I kept my attention on Daryl. "Todd, "Give me the gun," he whispered. "No, I want this bastard to tell me where Alexis is," I yelled as I continued to hold the gun to Daryl. The gun had felt heavy in my hand. I wasn't even sure if I could even shoot right if I did try to use it. Your wife? I don't know where she is," Daryl stammered. He was now looking more afraid than ever. I could be wrong. Did I just make a big mistake? I had to take the chance to find out the truth. "You hired Thomas to keep me locked up, didn't you?" I yelled. Another round of gasp filled the crowd. "Locked up? Mr. Glass, what is Todd talking about?" Stephen asked. "Tell him, Thomas," I yelled, keeping the gun on Daryl. "Tell him how you kept me confined in your house to build a damn panic room just to help Daryl get his spot with the hotel. I know you have Alexis," I continued. The crowd grew silent. I could see Thomas reach in his inside jacket pocket and pull out a badge. "Everyone calm down. It's okay, I'm a cop," he lied. My attention suddenly went up to Thomas as I looked at him wide-eyed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Thomas reached behind him and pulled out another 9mm gun tucked away in the back of his pants. "I didn't want to tell everyone this, but I have been keeping Todd. But we've been keeping him in a padded room, not a panic room. We've been holding him in our psychiatric ward because his wife had reported some domestic violence after being diagnosed with dementia. Paranoia is one of the symptoms," Thomas explained as he held his gun to my side. I gave Thomas the most shocking look I could give. I was outraged and yet amazed at how quick he came up with that lie. What? I stammered. "You guys aren't going to believe him, are you?" I asked. Their expressions answered my questions for me. I looked around at the sheepish looks on everyone's faces. Their faces were filled with fear and pity. Thomas had them. "Wow, Todd, I had no idea," Stephen mumbled as he shook his head in pity. No, I'm not crazy, he is," I protested. Thomas had shook his head too as he removed his handcuffs from his pocket. "He's an imposter. He's impersonating a cop," I yelled. The expression still remained the same. No one seemed to believe a word I was saying. As Thomas attempted to put the handcuffs on me, I shook myself from his grip. The gun fumbled out of my hand as I fell off of Daryl. Thomas swiftly reached over and picked it up. I stumbled to my feet as I tried to get away from Thomas. "Help me, please!" I screamed as I sprinted past Thomas to Stephen. Stephen had jumped back in fear. "Don't let him take me, please. Call the real cops," I pleaded. "Todd, I'm sorry, but you got to get yourself some help," Stephen said softly, trying to calm me down. "You're in good hands with Thomas. We'll take this project on from here," he continued. I looked around hopelessly as everyone inched back. "Listen to me, damn it! I'm not crazy! He killed my friends!" I exclaimed as I tried running to everyone for help. It was no use. They sided with Thomas. I was looking like the deranged one to them. No one there will help. Through the crowd, I saw my Jeep across the street. I realized I was free. I wasn't cuffed and I had witnesses. I knew if I ran, Thomas might shoot me, but at least they would see the truth. I planted my feet on the ground and started to make a run for it. "Don't let him get away. He's a danger to others," Thomas cried. And with that, the unthinkable happened. They listened to him. My own construction crew caught up with me and tackled me to the ground. At this point, there was no fighting them off. I continued to squirm and resist as much as I could as I heard Thomas get closer. "No, God, no," I sobbed. "Don't let him take me, please." I kicked and screamed as the construction crew held my arms behind my back. "I'm not the crazy one. I'm not," I let out. I suddenly felt the handcuffs around my wrist. "Thank you guys for your help," Thomas said as he tightened the cuffs. "I'm so sorry I brought this to your worksite. He will be properly treated at our facility," he continued. I tried to roll over away from Thomas' hold, but the construction crew continued to help Thomas. And surely as I expected, I felt the cold metal of the gun rush across the back of my head. Chapter 17. I sat in the panic room with my knees to my chest. The image of Anthony covered in dirt had replayed in my mind. I couldn't help but think that somewhere on the property lied AJ too. At this point, I knew him and Walter had to be buried out here too. I couldn't understand why Thomas had been so fixated on me.
I had entertained the idea that maybe architects have the equivalent admirers as the extreme fans of rock stars. As I rocked back and forth, I stared at my navy blue blazer that I had worn the first day I got here. I thought about my cell phone I had left in the inside pocket. I haven't checked it since my last conversation with Walter. I crawled over to the blazer and reached frantically for the phone. "Please be working," I mumbled to myself. I pulled out the phone and checked for a signal. There was only 1 bar on the signal meter. I knew 1 bar is better than none. I had attempted to call 911. 911, what's your emergency? My eyes widened as I listened to the first outside voice in a week. "Thank God!" I exclaimed. "Please help. I'm at 1464 Crane Road. My wife and I have been held hostage and there are dead bodies here. Hello? Hello?" I looked at the phone and saw the no signal message flash on the screen. I gave an exasperated sigh as I put the phone in my left jacket pocket. I felt a folded up piece of paper in the pocket. As I removed it, I noticed words written in burgundy ink. "Happy Anniversary." I never noticed it in my jacket. Alexis must have slipped it in. I had been working so much on the proposal for that hotel I had forgotten. I curled myself up in a fetal position on the floor as I began reading the letter. With each word I read, my heart dropped in my chest. "Todd, you are a blessing that goes beyond everything I had prayed for. You're kind, loving, and the most supportive man I know. How did I get so lucky, baby? What part of heaven did you come from? When I think of the 6 years we spent together so far, I think of the times you walked with me through it all, my pain, joy, and all my messy ways. When no one else believed in me and my potential in this world, you did. You showed me good men do exist. You truly are the exception. I only pray that our love will just grow stronger with each passing day, each and every year. Baby, I know you're probably working your brain to death on what to get me for our anniversary. This is only our first year, and I don't want us to worry about material things this year. Instead, let's just rejoice in the blessing God has bestowed upon us. This year, all I ask is that you don't change your loving ways with me. Don't stop being the great man I fell in love with, the same man that gave me his all August 19th, 2013. The journey we've taken to get here has been fun and frustrating, easy and challenging, but we still made it, and I can't wait to do it all over again on what is now our lifelong journey. Thank you for being you, always and forever yours, forever my love, Lexi.
Chapter 18.
"Ah, what the hell!" I belted. I had awakened, startled by a splash of cold water in my face. I heard the sound of Brian's hysterical laughter echoing over me. "You sure are ugly when you sleep," he jeered. "Rise and shine, buddy, you still got some work to do." I coughed as I looked up to see the barrel of his shotgun right between my eyes. The letter was tucked underneath my side. As I rose up from the floor, I inched my hand to it and picked it up. "I read that little letter of yours," he washed as I shoved it into my pocket. "Yeah, that's a mighty fine woman you got there," he said as he rotated his shoulder. "Ain't that just the cutest thing?" he jeered. I could tell he was joking the way he sneered as he talked. "Is she safe?" I asked meekly. Brian had stopped laughing and gave me a sheepish look. "Is she alive?" My eyes welled up as I thought of her. I folded my arms as I leaned against the newly finished wall. I scanned the unfinished part of the room, realizing how much I had left to do. "All this time I hadn't been there for her the way I should have," I volunteered. By the bewildered look on his face, I could tell that Brian was not prepared for my sudden confession. "I've been so focused on my work, I had barely had time to spend with her as much as I used to. I didn't try to make the time like I used to." I walked back to where the pile of tools were and sat down near them as I continued. "I guess it makes sense to be here. Too busy working while she's waiting for me," I sighed. I had removed the letter from my pocket again. Brian continued standing where he was like a trained soldier. In fact, he was trained. Thomas had to have conditioned Brian to not show compassion. Despite his bipolar and schizophrenic behavior, I could tell Brian had some hint of compassion left. I didn't even remember our anniversary. I shook my head as I flipped the folded-up paper in my hand. Maybe I deserve to be here. It's no different than being out there. I said, pointing towards the double doors. "She deserves better." My eyes remained focused on the letter. There was dead air that filled the room. What do I do? It was a rhetorical question I had asked myself. I looked up to see Brian with his gun lowered. He still had the same look of pity on his face. If Brian had just that hint of compassion that I could see he had, maybe I could convince him to help me escape. "Why do you listen to him, Brian?" I asked. He cocked his head and looked at me in confusion. "You do have a mind of your own. You don't have to do this." Brian looked at me as if checking to see if Thomas was behind him. I stood up and inched my way closer to him. Brian took a step back and looked at me uneasily. "Look, I know I have shut you out from me and my friends, and that was wrong of me when all you were trying to do was be a good neighbor." I knew the truth. Brian may have just been watching me this whole time, but maybe there was a part of him that really did want a companion. Alexis once told me I had a habit of looking for good in the worst people. She was right. Here I was trying to convince a schizophrenic killer that he's a good person. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice shaking as he began to raise his gun. The look on his face was as if he was staring at a rabid dog. "Brian, you do have a mind of your own," I said, patronizing. "You don't have to live under Thomas's commands. Don't you want to live for yourself? I know you're not a killer. You're better than that." I moved even closer with caution. I could tell Brian was letting down his guard. "I am a good person," Brian said. "I never wanted this. I just wanted us to be friends, Todd," he sniffed. A little part of me was beginning to feel a sense of hope. If I could get Brian on my side, he could be our ticket out. "I see what you and Alexis have together. I wanted that for myself. It's not fair, Todd. Why can't anyone just accept me for my flaws? Am I so bad to be around that I can't at least have a friend?" I could hear Brian choking up as he talked. With caution, I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Come on, Brian. Let's get out of here. You don't have to do this. This isn't for you, is it?" He lowered his head, looking at his gun. "No. You know what? You're right, man. This isn't me." He waved his right hand in a surrendering gesture. "I'm tired of doing things for Thomas. He may be older than me, but I'm a grown man. I can make my own decisions." I began to look at him pleadingly. "Well, let's get out of here. You don't belong here any more than me and Alexis do. We can leave together," I encouraged. He sighed in exasperation. "I'm not a bad person," he mumbled. He took another look at his shotgun. I glanced down at his gun. I began to entertain the idea of removing the gun from him. When I looked up, it didn't take long for me to realize that thought had crossed his mind too. In that quick moment, I watched his gun hurl towards my side. I dropped to my knees in agony, holding myself. "I'm not stupid either," he snarled. I coughed as I struggled to gasp for air. "And for the record, I'm not doing this for Thomas," he continued. I crawled over to the corner of the room. Brian was back to laughing hysterically. "You honestly thought I was gonna fall for that," he jeered. "No, I meant every word, I swear," I forced as I tried to recover from the blow. "I saw the way you looked at my gun," he sneered. "To think I thought you really wanted us to be friends." He shook his head as he turned to leave the room. It was clearly unfortunate timing to get caught looking at his gun. "Get back to work," he ordered. "Brian!" I desperately belted. He stopped in his tracks and turned to face me. "Just please tell me my wife is alive," I sobbed. His cold stare pierced through his eyeglasses as he stood in silence. It had to be the longest silence ever before he finally answered. "You'll meet your wife soon enough." Chapter 19. I struggled to shade my eyes from the sun that had been beaming through the skylight. As I continued to drill the final pieces of the ceiling tiles, I could hear Thomas rolling around on a desk chair he had brought into the room with him. He watched me put up the tiles as he sipped on his second Tom Collins. "For someone who's almost done, you sure look awfully down there, Todd." "Something wrong?" he observed. Brian nodded in agreement as he handed me another piece of ceiling tile. He knew the answer to that question. With every piece I put together, I was growing more anxious. I was almost finished. But what did that mean for me? I already knew too much. I had been a hostage here for over a week, and I've seen their faces and know their names. I couldn't allow myself to be that naive to think that they would actually let me go. I had no way out. They watched me like hawks. Brian gazed up as he nursed his shotgun. He hadn't taken his eyes off of me since the attempt to get him in alliance with me the other day. I turned around cautiously on the ladder and focused my attention to Thomas. "You're not going to let me go, are you?" It was a bold question that I already knew the answer to, but I was curious of what would come out of his mouth. Thomas had set his glass on the work table and stood up. "Now why on earth would you ask such a thing like that?" he asked as he walked over to me. "You don't think I'm a man of my word, Mr. Clemons? I gotta say I'm a little hurt that you would think that I'm not," he said. He had to be lying. At this point I couldn't tell. His face was hard to read. He always had a way of speaking with such content that you wouldn't be able to tell if he was genuine. As I stood up on the ladder, I was beginning to feel dehydrated and famished. "Well, you have my friends buried in your backyard. You can't really blame me for my shaken faith," I retorted. Thomas shrugged and nodded his head in agreement. "I can see how that would throw you off a bit," he said. He began to lean on the ladder as he continued to speak. "I am a man of my word. When I say your woman and you will be free, I mean it." I tried not to look directly in his eyes when he looked at me. His stares were chilling. What was once taken as a friendly smile had suddenly become a look you could carve into a jack-o'-lantern. I held my head as I began to feel dizzy and faint. The sun had been burning me through the glass skylight like an ant under a magnifying glass. "Looks like Toddy boy is a little dehydrated," Brian jeered. "I see," Thomas chimed as he continued to lean on the ladder. "Well, I guess we ought to get him a drink before he passes out on us again." Thomas had let go of the ladder and gestured for Brian to follow him out to the kitchen. I had watched as they walked out. Thomas had entered the code on the doors to close them. I was still on the ladder as I waited for the double doors to close. I had looked up once more at the sky. I had a good view of the hills that led out to the streets. As I watched the cars driving past, I could only imagine one of them deciding to turn on Crane Road, but no one did. A flock of birds had been flying by over the house. I had let my mind wander as I pictured myself flying along with them. I placed my hand on the glass as I watched longingly. I suddenly stopped fantasizing when I noticed something different about the glass. This didn't feel like the same thick glass that made up half the house. This was much thinner. It was just a regular cut window. This window was just thin enough to break. I had looked back at the double doors. I could no longer see Brian and Todd in the kitchen. I knew they hadn't stepped out just to get me anything to drink.
They were plotting their next move. I had realized volunteering my thoughts to Thomas was not a smart move. I was pretty much done with the room. They had no more use for me. Of course, they're going to kill me and Alexis. I shook my head and snapped out of my negative thoughts. No, I'm not going to let this happen. My wife and I are going to live, I had repeated over and over in my head as I climbed down the ladder. We're gonna live. I took another glance at the doors. Still no sign of them. I picked up a hammer that had been underneath the pile of power tools. I quickly climbed my way back to the top of the ladder. I felt the glass one more time. I had to be sure this was going to work. We're gonna live, I whispered to myself as I raised back my arm. I braced myself for the glass shattering over my head as I took a swing. A few pieces subsided onto the floor. I checked back again, making sure Thomas and Brian were near the door. Another swing, and the whole window collapsed. I felt my arms getting stabbed by the shattered pieces of glass. I didn't care. Any small pain from escaping is better than whatever I would be facing if I stayed. I quickly pulled myself further to the top of the ladder. I stretched my arms out and pulled myself up through the opening. Half of my body was on the roof now. As I took a final step to the top of the ladder, I suddenly felt it collapse from my feet. My heart was now beating double time. My feet were still dangling as I used my upper body strength as much as possible. Kicking the whole way, I managed to get my body on the roof. I smiled triumphantly. I made it out the room. I stood to my feet to get a better view of the traffic. I had to plan this out better. I couldn't afford any more mistakes. Just 5 feet away from me was the attic. Alexis had to be in there. I could see the octagon windows, but the glare from the sun was too bright to see her from where I was. I knelt down to crawl over the brick portion of the house.
"I'm coming, sweetheart," I mumbled as if she knew I was here. Maybe she could see me and just can't say anything. I had remembered her saying in the video that they would torture her each time I was defiant. I could only imagine what they had put her through. I was ready to get her out and get us as far away from this place as possible. I had made it to the attic window. When I looked inside, I had saw a chair, but there was no one in it. I scanned the room until my eyes had landed on a twin bed. I saw what looked like a body under the covers. Alexis. I quickly removed the latch that held the windows locked and climbed in. "Baby," I whispered as I ran over to her. "It's me. I'm going to get us out of here." She didn't respond. In fact, she didn't move or anything. I began to think the worst. I knelt down at the side of the bed, trying to shake my wife from underneath the covers. "Come on, Alexis, we gotta go," I continued. My heart raced as I removed the covers to see her face. I thought about how I haven't seen her in weeks. I had missed her so much. I closed my eyes slowly, leaned in for a kiss as I removed the covers off her head. When I opened my eyes, my heart did all but stop. I fell back in shock as I saw the decay of the body in front of me. Covering my face of the sight and smell, it took everything in me not to throw up again. I jumped up and ran to the other side of the room. I dropped down to my knees and began sobbing uncontrollably. I couldn't let myself look at her again. I knew that if I did, that would mean accepting the reality. I was too late. Chapter 20. I curled myself up in a ball as I sat in the corner of the attic. No, this can't be happening. But it was. I didn't finish in time to save her. I spent too much of it trying to escape to get to her. Alexis's body was still lying in the same position with her back turned towards me. The potent smell of decay had filled the room. I didn't know how I hadn't smelled it when I first entered through the window. It had suddenly dawned on me that this was their plan all along. They had already killed her the day they had made the video. They just used it against me to give false hope that she was still alive, waiting for me to finish. I could feel my chest tighten as I continued to put it together in my mind. I knew Brian and Thomas had to be looking for me by now. I didn't care anymore. The one woman I had been fighting to escape for was gone. I had just lost the love of my life. There's nothing left to fight for. I suddenly heard Thomas and Brian arguing downstairs. "How could you have lost him?" Thomas had yelled to Brian. "He got out through the ceiling. I don't know where he is," I heard Brian shout back. Thomas had been rambling on with the constant insults toward Brian as he ordered him to go look for me. I gazed up at the birds flying past the window again. "You're one of them now," I whispered. "You're free." Alexis would not have wanted me to give up like this. I'd like to think that she was still pushing me and motivating me to keep going from above. I listened. I wasn't giving up. If I wasn't going to do it for myself, then I should at least do it for her. She deserves justice. I now had a responsibility to make sure she gets that. I took a deep breath as I tried to calm my nerves. I finally stood up and walked over to Alexis's body. I kept my eyes closed as I pulled the cover back over her. I didn't want my last visual of my wife decomposed. I tried to preserve the better memories of her in my mind. I had opened my eyes when I was sure she was completely covered. I leaned down to kiss the top of her head. "Forever yours, forever my love," I whispered. I began to panic when I suddenly heard footsteps tapping against the glass staircase. I ran over to the window and peered down. I could see my Jeep and Thomas's car in the driveway. I knew if I was going to escape successfully, I would have to be driving. Something told me to check the desk drawers next to the bed. I ran over frantically and began opening each drawer. I tossed out every paper and trash that had been stuffed in the drawer, hoping to find some kind of key. To my surprise, I had discovered my key sitting in the bottom drawer. "Thank you, Lexi," I said to myself. As I removed the key, I noticed a wallet-sized picture of her. I looked at the picture bewildered as I picked it up to get a closer look. She looked much younger in the picture. She was posing with the usual duck face she always gives in her pictures. Why haven't I seen this picture before, and why did they have it? My guess was that they were just that perverted. I looked over to the bed where she lay cold and still. "What did they do to you, baby?" I asked myself. I tucked the picture away in my back pocket. The footsteps were sounding closer beneath me. With the keys tightly gripped in my hand, I had sprinted over to the window and climbed out onto the roof. It was higher than I had anticipated. "Toddy boy, where you at?" I heard Brian yell from inside. I decided to try and climb my way down instead of jumping. I had remembered Brian telling me how he messed up his arm falling out of a window this high. I knelt down on my hands and knees and crawled to the edge. To the left was a squirrel perched on the gutter. As I looked at it, I kept quiet to listen for Brian or Thomas. I didn't hear anyone. The squirrel had still been sitting there. It looked at me as if challenging me to a staring contest. He won. I wasn't about to stay up on the roof to keep looking at him. I began to let myself slide down the marble column that had supported the extension of the roof. I suddenly felt a hand grab my ankle halfway down. "Oh!" I yelled, startled. I looked down and saw Thomas using his one hand to pull me. "Brian, I got him. Get your ass out here and help me," he yelled. Using as much force as possible, I had kicked him in the face. As Thomas stumbled backwards, I let myself drop to the ground. My heart had raced as I sprinted over to the driveway. Brian had ran out in front of me through the automatic glass door. I managed to unlock the car door and hop in just as Brian began to fire his gun. To my luck, he was using Thomas's 9mm instead of the shotgun. 2 shots had been fired before he finally shot my right side view mirror. I backed out of the driveway, scraping the side of Thomas's car. "Shoot him, damn it!" Thomas yelled. It was too late. Pushing 70 miles per hour, I was already down the driveway and into the forest. The smile on my face was the biggest I've made in weeks as I watched the house become smaller and smaller in my rear view mirror. I sat in the parking lot of the police station silently. I couldn't stop crying every 5 minutes. It had really begun to sink in that my wife and friends were dead. I didn't know how I would be able to carry on with the rest of my life. Alexis and I had the rest of our lives ahead of us to spend together. I haven't spoken to Walter since the first day in that house. It was no telling where he was or if he was even still alive. For all I knew, he was somewhere stashed away in their house or under it. Either way, I had to come forward to the police. I finally was able to compose myself as I stepped out of the car. A part of me still felt like I was being followed. I looked around me to see if I could spot Brian or Thomas anywhere. I was extremely paranoid. Every person I saw with eyeglasses or a cane made me feel uneasy. I rushed into the front entrance of the station and stumbled my way over to the desk. The small group of people in the room gasped as they watched me trying to maintain my balance. I was still weak from the heat and dehydration. The cop that stood in at the desk looked at me in disbelief. "Good Lord, son, what the hell happened to you?" he exclaimed. I clearly wasn't the best sight to see. I still had dry blood on my nose, my clothes were dingy and full of dirt, and I haven't showered in over a week. My hygiene was the least of my problems. "Please, help me," I managed dryly between sobs. "Todd?" I heard a familiar voice call out behind me. I turned around to see Walter standing in shock. He must have been coming in on his shift. My eyes went to the cup of coffee in his hands. My legs buckled as I struggled to stand. I hadn't had a proper meal in days. I was feeling weaker by the minute. He rushed over to me as I started to lose my balance. "Whoa, you're gonna be all right," he assured as he lifted me. He looked at me in remorse as I continued to slump down to the floor. Walter had slid down beside me and gave me a hug. I needed that hug. I needed anything, anyone, to let me know that everything was going to be okay. 3 other cops had crowded around us as we sat on the floor. "Can someone get this guy some water, please?" Walter called out. 2 of the 3 cops spread out hurriedly to a water cooler and a table full of baked goods. "What happened?" he asked calmly. I sniffed as I tried to keep from crying. Thomas kept me for days," I started. He killed them." Walter looked at me confused. I could tell my words weren't forming full sentences. The 2 cops came back and handed me a cup of water and a small plate of Danish donut. "He killed who?" one of the cops asked. I took gulps of water before I answered. "Anthony and Alex they're dead," I cried. The cops stared sheepishly at me as I continued to sob. One of the cops knelt down to us. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm Officer Martin. We're going to find the son of a bitch that did this and bring him in. But we're going to need your cooperation and description of this fella. You think you can do that?" he asked. I could barely breathe, let alone speak clearly. I had to let them know as much as I could as soon as possible, but I was just too weary. "You know what? This is a good friend of mine. He's clearly not in the right condition to speak yet. I'm going to have him come up with me for a minute to regroup,"
Walter informed the inquiring cops as he began lifting me up from the floor. "Y'all gonna head, I'll talk to him." The 3 other cops scattered away as Walter guided me outside. We had walked over to his squad car. He let me sit in the front passenger seat. I had tried breathing in and out as Walter entered in the driver's side. We sat in silence for 3 minutes before anyone said the first words. "He really killed them?" Walter choked. He looked in disbelief. I nodded my head silently. "I'm so sorry, man," he sighed. He leaned in to give me another hug. "What am I going to do? She was my world," I confided. Walter shook his head. I looked across the parking lot at the police station. 2 cops that surrounded us inside were now outside watching us. "You know what? Fuck this," he exclaimed. I looked over at Walter as he started the car. "What are you doing?" I asked wide-eyed. Walter looked at me in rage. I had never seen him so upset. "I'm going to take them asses down myself." Chapter 21. I looked at Walter wide-eyed. Going back to that house was the last thing I wanted. "No, it's too dangerous to go up there alone. We got to get back up," I exclaimed. Walter wasn't thinking. He had already backed out of the parking lot and into the street. "Todd, he killed your wife and our friend. Don't you want to get this bastard personally? His ass deserves to get what's coming," Walter protested. No one wanted that man dead as much as I do. I actually couldn't believe that I was trying to convince someone not to take matters into their own hands. Had Thomas and Brian not had their guns, I probably would have tried myself. Walter was already speeding down Lancaster Avenue. His sirens wailed as we hurled through traffic. "I want this guy dead too, but not this way. Let the judge and jury decide his fate," I pleaded. I couldn't fathom going back to that house for the 3rd time. "Todd, this is beyond what any jurisdiction can do for us. We have to stand up for ourselves. Some things we can't depend on the rules and regulations of the law for." I looked at Walter in amazement and confusion at the same time. I thought the whole purpose of him becoming a cop was to protect the city the right way. I was starting to believe he only joined criminal justice to abuse his power. I gave up pleading. Walter was right. Why should we wait for a jury to give him a sentence less than what he deserves? We had arrived at the house. For the 3rd time, I found myself staring at this house. Although I had dreaded being there, I did feel more safe knowing I had my best friend and cop with me. "All right, you stay here while I go in," he suggested. "Wait," I warned, grabbing his arm. "He's not by himself," I said. "Who else is there?" he asked. "Brian, that guy that lives across the street from us, is in there." "He's Thomas's brother," I whispered. Walter looked at me wide-eyed. "Are you serious?" Walter exclaimed. "Turned out our theory about him wasn't too far-fetched," I said. Walter looked back at the house in bewilderment. "Just stay here. If you see any of them, just turn on the siren," Walter instructed as he showed me where the button was. I nodded my head in agreement. I watched as Walter cautiously walked to the front door. "Thomas Glass, this is the police. Drop your weapon and come out with your hands up," Walter had ordered. There was no answer. The automatic door didn't open when Walter had walked up to it. I began to wonder if they were even there. I looked over to the left where Thomas's car was sitting. It was no longer sitting there. Walter looked back at me and shrugged his shoulders. I continued to scan the front yard of the house, but no sign of anyone. I had imagined they were out roaming the streets looking for me. It had amazed and frustrated me that the one time I have helped they were nowhere to be found. Walter took a few steps back and shot at the door. I took a deep breath as he walked in over the shattered glass. My heart raced as he became less visible. Once again, I was alone. "It's going to be all right. We're going to get these guys, and it'll all be over," I attempted to reassure myself, but it wasn't working. I gazed up at the octagon window in the attic. My eyes welled up as I thought of Alexis. This was our last place we spent in the same place, and I didn't even get to be with her before she died. I couldn't wait for Walter to find them. It suddenly occurred to me, Walter has been alive this whole time. If he knew my predicament, why hadn't he come for me sooner? My thoughts were suddenly interrupted by 2 gunshots. Startled, I had turned my attention to see the broken front door. It was too dark to see anyone inside. I could hear rumbling in the house, but I couldn't make out what was going on. I suddenly saw Walter running through the dark hall to the front entrance. As the sun set, I could barely see his face. I had wondered why he was running back and alone.
He made his way back to the driver's side of the car. "Walter, what are you do—" I stopped talking when I realized this wasn't Walter getting in the car. He stared at me through his thick frame glasses. "Hey, Toddy boy," Brian shouted. I looked at him in horror as I realized he had taken Walter's uniform. As I turned to get out of the car, the feeling of cold, hard steel had stung across the back of my head. My eyes opened to the glow of the full moon glowing from the skylight. I didn't have to look around to know where I was. What puzzled me was how every time I escape, I managed to land right back here. I was starting to feel like a video game character that can never make it to the next level of the game. I didn't bother to move. As far as I was concerned, Walter was probably already dead. The room was finished, but I knew that didn't matter anymore. They couldn't allow a witness to their crime to run free. As I lied on my back, I had reached in my pocket and pulled out the picture of Alexis. I forced a smile as I stared at the picture. "I guess I'll see you soon after all," I mumbled as I kissed the picture. As I gave the picture another glance, something had stood out to me that I didn't notice before. I knew Alexis had to have been younger because she looked a lot younger and was carrying a backpack. But that wasn't what was odd. It was the hill behind her that had caught my attention. The 2-story house had looked familiar. "Is this the same house?" I asked myself, studying the picture. The house wasn't glass, but it looked just like its original build. By the time my eyes made its way to the number 1464 on the mailbox where Alexis had stood next to it in the picture, my question had been answered for me. "Yes," a meek voice had echoed across the room. I knew that voice. I knew it very well. But it couldn't be possible. My heart raced as I slowly sat up to see the light brown eyes behind the voice. I looked across the room in amazement, excitement, joy, and horror all in one. "Hi, sweetheart." Alexis smiled at me as she sat in the far corner of the room. Chapter 22. This had to be a dream. How could she be sitting here right now? Alexis?" I stammered. She looked around the room in awe at the work that I've done. I quickly stumbled to my feet as I rushed over to her. "Oh my God!" I whispered as I stared in disbelief. I didn't know whether to smile or scream. I didn't realize I was already smiling anyway. I began to hug her and kiss her repeatedly. "Baby, I thought I had lost you," I said. I began sobbing as I held Alexis tighter. "It's okay," she whispered in my ear. There was no one else I'd rather hear those words from than her. I stepped back to search for any marks or wounds from torture. There wasn't a mark on her body. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" I asked. Alexis placed her hand on my chest as she gazed up at me. I could see her eyes welled up with tears. "I'm fine," she managed. I shook my head in disbelief, looking her up and down. "I love you so much," I exclaimed. I hugged her once again. I could smell the faint coconut scent of her hair from the hairspray she usually uses. I closed my eyes as I took in the moment. "I love you too," she whispered, "and that makes it even harder for me to kill you." Those words sent a chill down my spine as I opened my eyes. I slowly removed myself from her embrace. "Alexis, what did you just say?" Those words couldn't have come out of her mouth. "I told them to keep you alive as much as possible. If anyone was going to do it, it was going to be me," she explained. My heart felt like it was going into my stomach. "What are you saying, Alexis?" All the emotions I was feeling had now narrowed down to one feeling: fear. I continued to back away as her words punched me in the chest. "I never meant for it to drag out this long, but it had to be done eventually," she said, walking closer to me. The picture in my hand had slipped from between my fingers onto the floor. "Yes, that is me in front of the house," she said, staring at the picture. She knelt down to pick it up. "But I don't understand," I sighed. My back was now against the wall. Why would my own wife want to kill me? The question raced through my mind. I couldn't think of a single reason. "We had a good life in that home. I remember times I'd run downstairs Christmas mornings, hug my mom and dad, open presents with my brothers," she continued, looking at the picture. "We were a family, a happy family," she started. Her gaze went back to me. "At least until your mother ruined it," she said. I stood frozen. "What?" I tried to say, but no sound came out. I had thought to myself that this couldn't be the family. "My mom told me one night that they were getting a divorce because my father couldn't stay away from that slut you call a mother. I held in so much anger because of her. My eyes widened as she inched her way over to me. I wanted that bitch to suffer, she whispered. She stopped in her tracks, then began pacing back and forth around the room as she spoke. But then I find out that I wasn't the only angry kid in this situation. After spending months over my grandparents trying to figure out how I was going to make her pay, I come home to see someone already made their first move. I shook my head in disbelief as I continued to watch her pace. Because of that first move that other angry kid made, I now have one brother with a dislocated shoulder, another brother with a bum and burned leg, she sniffed as she stopped pacing, and 2 dead parents. She began to cry as she looked up at me again. No, I whispered as I stared bewildered. You never saw me, but I saw you hiding behind the trees that night. I came home to a burning house, she cried. I knew exactly who you were because I had followed your family every day since I found out who the other woman was. She stood staring with her fist balled. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So instead of going after your mom, I went for you, she said, closing her eyes. I looked at her sheepishly as she walked closer to me. I had my brothers go after your dad. That part was easy. But I had something special for you and your mom. I flinched when she lifted her hand to rub my face. Oh, Todd, she chuckled. You always were such a coward, she said, shaking her head. I'm going to have to agree with Lexi on that one. I heard a voice echo from the far corner of the room. I looked over Alexis's shoulder as Walter stepped out of the shadowed corner. He had on his uniform pants with his utility belt, but was missing his long-sleeved cop shirt. Walter, I whispered. I began to feel dizzy. This was all too much to process. She's right, you were a coward, he said as he twirled his nightstick. Walter, what are you doing? I asked, barely audible. It was those same cowardly ways that got my father wrongfully accused of arson and murder. He walked over to me as he started. Alexis had backed away to let Walter move closer. They put my daddy away for a long time, at least until they finally ruled a death sentence for him, he said, poking the nightstick in my chest. My heart raced as I looked Walter in the eyes. It should have been you on the other side of that needle, he snarled. In that swift moment, I watched the nightstick rise up and come down on my head. "Aw, shit!" I screeched as I dropped to the floor. All your daddy had to do was confess that his shit-faced son was the one that did it. But like coward-like son, he told the police that my father was the one that feuded with her family. He snarled, kicking my stomach. He was just trying to protect me, I protested as I crawled away from them. Where was our protection, Todd? Alexis belted. Who was going to protect my family? I looked up and saw Alexis holding Walter by the waist as he cradled her head on his chest. Both of you had been setting this up all along? You are all crazy, I cried. Oh, it wasn't easy, but we made it work, Alexis responded. My heart dropped as I watched her kiss Walter. I thought her marrying you would be a bit too much, but she really convinced me that the deeper you get attached, the more pain you'll feel in the end, Walter volunteered. I sat against the wall, holding my stomach. They were right. I felt horrible. I had already been holding the guilt of killing the parents of 3 kids and letting the wrong person go to prison, but this was a real twist of the knife. I'm just glad she let me have a go at it before you got to touch her, he laughed, grabbing her butt. Alexis laughed along with him. Ugh, I couldn't wait to get the hell out of that house, she giggled. My stomach was turning in knots as I listened to them. I suddenly remembered the body up in the attic that I had believed to be Alexis. Who was that in the attic if you're alive? I asked. Alexis and Walter exchanged glances before they let out another burst of laughter. If I can't have both of my parents, why should you? Alexis snarled. The knot in my stomach had tightened even more. My mom? I choked. Alexis removed herself from Walter's embrace and knelt down in front of me. I decided to let her live with the guilt of cheating and being the cause of your father's death, she spoke softly, until I felt like she shouldn't live anymore, she said. Don't worry, I let her say her final words to you before I shot her. You did get her voicemail, right? She asked. My eyes shifted from her to Walter. I don't understand, I started. The home I set on fire was the Weiss family home, I confessed. Alexis looked at me in exasperation. There was no Weiss family, hon. It was a made-up name just like my maiden name, Woodley, she confessed as she rubbed my face again. I told the cops and reporters to state us as the Weiss family because I didn't want our name out there. Had I gave our real name, we wouldn't have ended up together, she continued. My eyes welled up as I looked around the room. All this time, for 15 years, I've been under your family's microscope? Everything I thought I knew our 6 years together had been a lie? I whispered as tears rolled down my face. Alexis had shaken her head in disagreement as she continued to caress my face. No, over time I had begun to fall for you. You actually were lovable, she confessed. But I had to remind myself who I truly was. I am not a Woodley, and I am definitely not a cowardly Clemons. I am a glass. I suddenly saw a tear subside from her eyes as she continued to speak. Her caressing suddenly became a squeeze to my jaw. And when you fuck with a glass, then you're put in the glass house. And those who live in the glass house shouldn't throw stones, or in your case, cherry bombs, she snarled. So who's really the crazy one here? She gave my face one hard squeeze before shoving my head against the wall. She rose up from the floor and began to walk towards the double doors. I watched as Thomas and Brian walked in the room with gasoline cartons in their hands. Wait, what are you all doing? I frantically climbed to my feet. Before I could stand, Walter removed his stun gun and used it on me. I could only watch, paralyzed, as they poured gasoline all over the room. Wait, please, I begged. We are mighty appreciative of you to build this room for us, Thomas chuckled as he poured the last bit of gasoline on me. I guess I probably should have told you that these fireproof walls are to protect the fire from escaping this room, he exclaimed. But with you being an architect and all, I thought you knew that. I looked up in shock around the room. How did I not know that? Whew! You're pretty much in an oven now, Toddy boy, Brian shouted as he shook out his carton. As Walter, Thomas, and Brian walked back out with Alexis, I crawled as much as possible towards them. Please, don't do this, I sobbed as I continued to crawl. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, I pleaded as I watched them get further away. My body was still too weak from the electric shock to move. I looked up and saw Thomas remove a lighter from his pocket. Always prepared, he gleamed. Since you like to smoke, we thought we'd help light one up for you, Alexis said as she pulled out a cigarette. My heart raced as I helplessly watched them light the cigarette. See ya in hell, she said. Please don't. I swear I didn't mean to kill your parents. I gave my final plea as Alexis tossed the cigarette in the room. The amber flames ignited as they closed the door. I crawled to best of my ability, but the flames had already blocked my path. They each stood in the front of the door with cold stares as they watched me through the window. I let out a mix of screams and sobs as my back slid down the wall. Tears subsided down my cheeks as the 6 years of Alexis and I being together flashed in my mind. I had begun to think of our first dance as a married couple at our wedding reception. Our song, Always and Forever, by Heatwave, played in the back of my mind as I sat curled up against the wall. I put my head in my knees and closed my eyes in defeat. I never wanted to kill them, I whispered. I just wanted to scare them a bit. Epilogue. 1 year later. She sat in the room, silent, unwavering. Alexis looked confident as cops gazed at her on the other side of the glass. Boy, what a day. What we got here, Detective Martin? Lieutenant Kevin McKnight was on his third cup of coffee. Alexis Glass. With her record, she's headed for the big one, Detective Martin explained. What happened? Lieutenant Kevin asked as he sipped. Turns out her family have just been one killing circus, and you're looking at the ringleader. Lieutenant Martin shook his head in disbelief. And get this, her boyfriend was Officer Walter. He was in on the whole thing, too, he said. Shame, too. She's a beauty. Lieutenant Kevin started as Detective Martin opened the door to the interrogation room. It's always the pretty ones, Lieutenant Kevin mumbled as he took another sip, watching Detective Martin join Alexis at the table. The metal of the backrest felt cold on Alexis's exposed back as she sat back. So what? Am I arrested, officer? She chewed her gum as she spoke. Detective Martin sighed and rolled his eyes in exasperation. "It's Detective," he corrected. "Oh, I'm sorry, Detective." She spoke, making air quotes with her fingers. "We can make this really easy for you. Your brother Thomas is already facing the death sentence. All you gotta do is confess. You may get a lesser sentence," Detective offered. Alexis smirked as she noticed him catching a glimpse of her cleavage through her tank top. He looked up sheepishly when he realized he had been caught. "Like what you see, Detective?" she quipped. He cleared his throat as he attempted to regain focus. Alexis let out a chuckle as she blew him a kiss. "Alexis, I'm going to need your cooperation here. Are you aware of just how much trouble you're in, ma'am?" She blew a bubble as she spoke. "You think this is a joke?" he yelled as he slammed down the newspaper. Alexis glanced down at the article on the front page of the Texas Tribune. A Glass family shattered. Alexis, Thomas, and Brian Glass, descendants of the late Jeremy and Lynn Glass, have been taken into custody after local hikers discovered bodies of Mary Clemons and Anthony Jackson. "We were just up the hills near this Glass house when noticed an arm sticking out of the ground," Melissa Brickley told us. "It took no time for the cops to tie the murders to the Glass siblings." According to an anonymous onlooker, SWAT team had surrounded the Glass home that had once been destroyed in flames on Crane Road. Investigators say when they entered the home, Alexis Glass had been holding a gun to her own brother Brian as hostage in a desperate attempt to resist arrest. Her second oldest sibling, Thomas, surrendered immediately. Officer Walter Sheen had been found in the home dead with multiple gunshots. Reports of domestic violence had been constantly sent to cops weeks prior from Alexis. SWAT officer Kelly Wilson was the one that discovered the horrific sight of Todd Clemons, son of Mary Clemons, buried in a greenhouse connected to the west wing of the home. According to Brian Glass's confession, the greenhouse had been a renovation after they burned Todd Clemons alive in a panic room built by Clemons himself. Detectives believe this may have been a crime of passion after Clemons had been discovered as the real killer of the deceased parents of the Glass parents, Jeremy and Lynn Glass, 16 years ago. Detective Martin tossed down photos of the mutilated bodies of Todd and Anthony. "You find these a joke?" he scolded. "What about this?" He tossed down another body of Todd's mother. "You don't understand." She broke down in sobs as she laid her head on the table. "He was the monster, not us," she protested, slamming her fist down. "Oh, really?" he asked skeptically. "If you knew what I dealt with, you wouldn't look at me the way you're looking now," she yelled. Detective Martin raised his hand for her to stop. "Okay, Alexis. Why don't you tell me your side what happened?" Alexis's sobbing had ceased. She slowly raised her head. The room was filled with dead silence. She finally let out an exasperated sigh as she leaned on the table. She shook her hair out of her face and mustered a slow grin as she finally began to speak. "Okay." This has been The Glass House, Special Edition, Glass Series, Volume 1. Written by Niels Williams. Narrated by Jeff Clark. Copyright 2014 by Niels Williams. Production copyright 2014 by Niels Williams.